271. Intertwined Hearts. Satria, Edna, Rune and Izar. Edna spent days in the Relic City, observing how the temples and the people worked. With her advanced surveillance tools, it was fairly easy for her to soon get a sense of where everything was, and how it worked. It was a beautiful city. Especially the Temple of Hawa. It was incredibly grand, and made with an opulence unmatched in any world Edna's seen before. Its structure was made with a kind of shimmering marble, and the arches were decorated with gems and a kind of gold paint that looked more gold-like than gold. It was magic, and the presence of divine magic in the area was unmistakable. The relic in the deepest part of the temple bubbled, twisting the fabric of reality in a way only domain holders like Edna could feel. Here, they were close to the gods, and Edna was sure of it. She hoped that she would be able to arrange an audience with the gods. That would help the war effort, and figure out what the hell went wrong with the demons. So, the time to make a scene finally arrived. I'd like to see the head priest. Edna declared frankly in the temple. She had been watching the place for a while, and noticed that the head priest was present for a meeting with the city's king. He was frequently away, but this was one of the days when she saw him enter. The priest stared at Edna like she was an alien. Who do you think you are? No one sees the head priest. I insist. Edna's aura flared, and the priest felt his hands tremble. She thought of more discreet methods, but decided against it. It was better to just hit it directly. If they were unfriendly, then she'd deal with it that way. I will let him know. Who he will want to know who wants to see him. Tell him I am a warrior from another world, and representative of another god. Edna repeated, and the priest's trembling looked even more intense. His eyes met Edna's burning gaze briefly, and he ran. At once, milady. Edna expected an army of Templars to charge down at her, and so, when an army of Templars armed with divine weapons did in fact emerge, she wasn't shocked. This way, milady, one of the priests said, escorted by what appeared to be a decent army of Templars. They were all about level 70 to 80, which made them very strong by most measures. With their divine equipment, they could stand a chance even with the higher level Valthorns. Edna was escorted into the depths of the temple, and she could sense people moving throughout the temple. There was a huge guard force appearing around the relic, as if worried that the relic would be attacked. She just smiled, and walked past the corridors of paintings and tapestries all speaking praises of their god, Hawa. Eventually, she was led to a chamber far from the relic, and was clearly not the actual chamber of the head priest. But the head priest was there, decked from head to toe for war. Divine armaments, rings, armors. They would take a hit. Greetings, milady. Of all the outlandish attempts to get an audience with me, yours is the most ludicrous. A visitor from another world, and representative from another god. The head priest said. He was smug. So ridiculous. So, you succeeded. What do you want? Edna didn't feel the need to answer it with words, and merely allowed her domain to ripple outwards. It shook the cloth and tapestries. The magical defenses in the room vibrated. The head priest felt his rings tremble, as if begging to be activated. It caused the head priest's face to contort from smugness, into horror, and then, to fear. He then stood. You're not lying. Edna shrugged. Why would I? I come from another world, a world that also has Hawa as one of our people's faith. She looked around, and withdrew her domain. The trembling in the room vanished. I will cut to the point. I want an audience with Hawa. The head priest stared at Edna as if she was mad. An audience with our god. Are you insane? No. We found the demon's son, and we need your god's help. Only gods can hope to strike at the demon's power. The head priest frowned. You're insane. How do you hope to? It's not the first time we spoke to a god. Edna countered. If it helps, let your god know we have spoken to Ava. The head priest shook his head. Communion with our god is a costly, resource-intensive process. And it happens whenever you select your champions for this world. I know Hawa can be reached from this world. And why should we do it? Because we will get it eventually. Edna answered. All the delays merely add time, but do not prevent the inevitable. We will find the gods, one way or another. Be it Ava, Hawa, Gaia, Nera or whoever other gods out there that we have not seen. And. The head priest stared. We can help. We have the ability to breach distances through the system. Our patron god can create permanent pathways between worlds, allowing your god to extend power further than ever. He paused and closed his eyes. You mean it? Proof that you are from another world. I would gladly send you to our world if you want to, but I ask that you trust me, and consult whoever you need to consult. Edna repeated. The Hawa temples of Satria were a coalition of Hawa churches, each with a relic, each with its own head priests. Collectively, they operate as a council of equals, though each branch of the Hawa church were functionally independent. They often do not intervene with each other, outside for the rare moments when Hawa descends and transmits a message. Divine communion. Edna heard that it was possible since a long time ago. Some priests and priestesses hear the voices of their gods in their mind, through dreams. It is unmistakable, because the god's presence is extremely difficult to fake. The head priest looked at Edna uncomfortably, before letting out a long sigh. Can you show me that aura of yours? Again. At full strength. The head priest answered. I'll take it as proof of your claims. To initiate a conversation with our god requires agreement of all the head priests. This is a matter far more serious than what I can do alone. Edna sighed, and let it rip. This time, the walls cracked, as the full weight of her close to level 200 aura rippled through the entire city. The entire city would have felt it, as if something pressed on them. A weight of power. The head priest and all the divine guards clenched their weapons. Edna smiled. They were strong enough to resist, because Hawa's blessing was exceptionally strong in this world. But even the weaker few felt their legs buckle. If Lumuf was here, they would all be kneeling. That is unmistakable indeed. Tell the rest of the head priests that we offer a return trip to our world, to have an audience with my patron, Eon. I believe once you meet Eon, you will find that our request to meet Hawa to be not unreasonable. The head priest nodded. I will need some time to speak to the rest of my peers. The Hawa's circle don't meet often, and the next meet is in a few months. I will bring this matter up then. Edna nodded. We can wait. I have plenty else to do. How'd it go? Rune and Izar asked over their shared communication. The head priest said they will bring it up to the Hawa's circle meet in a few months. How are things on your side? Edna said as she retreated to an inn. Went as well as expected. I popped into the head priestess room, and I got misunderstood as a suitor, and apparently, if a single man appears in a single woman's room at night, I am supposed to take her as my wife. Rune said. Izar facepalmed from his part of the city. Edna chuckled. I think this is the second time you did something like that. Rune just shrugged. I seem to attract the wrong kind of people. You should be popping up in people's rooms at night. Edna said. She is heavily guarded as hell, and I really don't want to knock people out just to talk to her. My attempts to get in through the front door got shut off because the head priestess gets too many people trying to meet her that way. She sounds cute. The knight smirked. Oh please. Rune said. How'd she take your confession? She asks me to call the rest of you here. Rune said. And she still wants me to marry her. Edna laughed. She takes that pretty seriously. It's a faith thing. Some religious mumbo jumbo. I didn't see such a rule in the Hawa documents we have back home. Tell her you are married. I plan to. Next time, we should insist on same-sex night visits. Rune countered. I am not visiting a woman at night ever again. Never seems to go well. Not with my kind of shit luck. I wouldn't call it shit luck. The other two domain holders laughed. Edna smirked. Alright. Izar, what's your situation? The head priestess is an old woman. She listened, but she thought I am a madman, so chased me out. I think we'll need Lumuf here to speak to her kind of person. It's just a vibe I am getting. Think she respects someone like Lumuf. Darn. Very well. I think we should make ourselves seen during the coming meeting of the Hawa's circle. Edna added. That should be our best place to make our case to Hawa. They don't even say where it is, it's one of those super secretive meetings. Rune countered. Ask your fiancé where it is, then. Edna asked. She's not, and I am not manipulating a woman's love for that. Rune countered. There's some red lines in my life, and that's one of them. Edna chuckled. You're pretty chivalrous, despite your fondness for late-night visits. Stop it. Edna, Izar, just come over to my side of the world and visit this woman with me. And Edna, you're going to pretend to be my wife. Edna laughed. You really want an old woman like me as your pretend wife instead of a beautiful young priestess? Why not tell her you have a wife somewhere else? I am not marrying some priestess I barely know. So shut it and play along. Very well. Edna laughed. Edna realized all the relic cities were flat out beautiful. They were so well protected and covered with divine magic that it didn't seem likely that the demons would be able to attack them. The relic city of Pash was located along a gentle slope along the hills, and the temple occupied a central location, surrounded by walls. There was a beautiful silver statue that was 15 stories tall of a man with a sword, a shield, and wearing a knight's helmet. There were 5 castles throughout the city, each located along the walls, and each home to one of the ducal families of Pash. Among the 5, one would be king at one time, and the role of king rotated among the 5 families. But Pash was also home to a relic, and it was a gigantic divine shield too big for any man to wield. Still, even from afar, Edna could feel the divine energies stored within. Should a demon king attack, it was likely they could hold the city. Just like the other relic city, the presence of Hawa was strong. Divine magics rippled in the air, the shield's presence warped reality. Edna briefly wondered what it'll be like to move all the divine relics together. So your prospective wife is located there? Edna said. Yes. Okay. Remember, our goal is really to get an audience with Hawa. This priestess is one of the circle, so she can help facilitate that objective. Edna repeated. Ready. Rune shrugged. I don't really want to see her again. Can you just go? Please, you're a domain holder and you don't want to see a woman again. Come on. Edna countered. Izar just grinned. I must say, Rune, I don't recall ever seeing you this flustered. Look, Izar, you go visit a woman at night. I've done it. Izar laughed. They don't mistake me as a suitor. Maybe I just have a punchable face that women hate. You, on the other hand, look like the pretty boys that women absolutely adore. Rune flushed. Oh, I am never gonna let that slide. Izar chuckled. Rune glared. I hate you. Edna just rolled her eyes. Boys, focus. We got a priestess waiting for us. Let's convince her to side with our cause. Yes, ma'am. The priestess room was located in a magically protected sphere, in one of the inner buildings of the temple. It was heavily protected, that most mages wouldn't even be able to get in, but for domain holders, the restraints and magical protections just washed off their bodies. She was half asleep in her sleeping gown when she noticed the window was open, and felt the presence of others in her room. Despite her seemingly youthful experience, Edna was fairly sure she was a high-leveled priestess, in the same league as the other high priest she met. She was likely to be around level 70 to 80, and she wore a special necklace around her neck filled with divine magic all the time. Oh, you're here again. With guests. The priestess spoke. As Edna expected, she was a beautiful woman, well equipped in all the right places, and blessed by Hawa. Edna could feel the presence of Hawa's blessing, just like in the high priest. It's likely they have a Hawa high priest class or something similar. Are they the suitors' party? Rune frowned. I am not marrying you. The priestess frowned. Am I that unattractive? So many men desire me, and here you are. I offer you my hand in marriage and you reject me. Rune's frustration was palpable. Woman, I am here to continue that conversation. We need an audience with your god, Hawa. She frowned. I'll raise your cause during the Hawa's circle if you agree to take me as your wife. I am married. Don't lie to me. I don't sense a woman's presence on you. The priestess countered. In truth, that was because the priestess couldn't sense anything on Rune, who was protected by his own domain. I don't believe in your god. Rune countered. Doesn't matter. Hawa will forgive you. Edna inwardly felt sorry for her fellow domain holder. He seemed to attract a certain type of crazy. Edna decided to breach the topic. Milady, we wish to have an audience with Hawa. What else can we offer to get your support during the Hawa's circle meeting? She thought about it for a moment, and stared at Edna briefly. Then she frowned. Nothing. I want this man to take me as his wife. Edna countered. Priestess, we really do not wish to mix personal matters into affairs involving the fate of worlds. There are worlds that could benefit from our mutual cooperation. I know. But as head priestess, I have full prerogative and discretion in my decisions, as granted to me by Hawa. And so my condition remains. He takes me as his wife. Edna realized this woman was nuts, and looked at her 2 colleagues. Well, I believe we have nothing more to add. Let's go. Edna would rather take the chance and convince the other head priests and priestesses. This woman was probably a little messed up in the head. But as Edna, Rune and Izar was about to vanish through the door again, the priestess realized her ways was probably too aggressive. Wait. Rune and Edna stood. Oh, you claim to be from another world, correct? The priestess spoke. Yes. Take me on a trip together. Just the 2 of us, to your world. I don't believe I can't convince you to take me as your wife. If you remain unmoved, fine, I'll support your cause anyway. The priestess said to Rune. Edna looked at Rune, and Rune made a long sigh. Fine. I'll take you on a trip to our world. Later. The priestess smiled beautifully. I can't wait to see you again, husband Tilda. Rune rolled his eyes and vanished through the window. They would visit the other head priests, and attempt to convince them of their cause. 272. Revitalizing old seeds. C272. Year 266. The first of the comet fragments emerged from the void. We have been tracking it the moment it appeared within our vision, and we watched with great interest for the moment it entered our bubble of reality. The first few meteors popped out of the darkness, like a cluster of rocks that suddenly shed its cloak of invisibility. A quick scan revealed that we didn't detect Multipus' presence, but among the rocks was a slightly larger chunk of the comet's core, and that rock maintained a small bubble of reality. Engage. My mages ordered as the meteors entered our range. Mages, in our tree-based environmentally controlled battlesuits, attacked the rocks. They were much smaller, and it seemed the very act of traveling through the void had eroded them one way or another. It was a good sign. It meant that without a strong bubble of reality, the rocks we expect to face should be smaller than the main comet. The distant dark skies, not visible from Treehome, erupted in explosions of magic. With extremely powerful telescopes it would be possible to see some small sparks and explosions, but we destroyed the smaller remnant meteors. For the core remnant, a few of our mages hopped onto the rock and tried to steer it. Core material was valuable. I have it in such little quantities that if there was a core chunk from the demon's comet, we wanted to see whether we could process it, and learn from it. But like core mana, it degrades quite quickly, especially when exposed to the light of the sun. Which was strange. One of the quirks of core mana. For now, with magical propulsion, we guided this remnant rock from the core of the demon's comet, and directed it into a somewhat stable orbit. My Valthorn mages then quickly set up a basic manipulation system, just a few magical patterns and formations that created some propulsion to steer the core away from Treehome. This would allow it to maintain that stable orbit. It wasn't big, but we wanted to examine this core remnant in greater detail. I was fairly impressed that we now had our first space-based research station. My Valthorn's first space-based research station consisted of portable living quarters from our almost century-long experience of building underground bunkers, and later on our developments on the Demon's Comet, Lavaworld, Cometworld and our moon. Travel to and from the research station in our world was a lot simpler, since we had access to magical portals and teleportation spells. We didn't need rockets. Even deploying our new wood-based mechs involved teleportation to the closest undisturbed space. Stella watched as the first engagements with the meteor remnants proceeded as planned, and as my forces exert itself on Threeworld, on Mountainworld, on Dwarfworld, and now, even this world of Satria. And so begins the imperial era of Eon. Stella said as she arrived in Threeworld, and watched my Valthorns crawling all over the city of Myelga. You speak of it as if it's new. I chuckled. It's just an observation, really. My void domain holder watched. Within a year, we had to quell dissent in the human lands. In many ways, an era of great political change for the three worlds' humans. In normal times, the Sandpeople and the Centaurs would capitalize on this to wage an attack and try to claim some fringe territories from the human kingdoms. But with the presence of my overwhelming beetles, they know better. The Centaurs have seen my warriors in their lands, and know that we have far stronger warriors than them. Jonpu, of them all, seemed to have most to think about. The nature of our relationship was perhaps an ally of convenience, but my occupation of Myelga had made him feel a little queasy, as if he invited evil into his home. Perhaps it was a sensation to have power challenged. I thought it might be a sense of vulnerability. Or perhaps it was how relatively easy it was to suppress the Crystal King, even with the Crystal King's huge array of hero items. He didn't manage to use them, and I also discovered they were primarily designed for use against heroes that turned rogue. The hero item's effectiveness against Lumuf was suspect, and this was something that I saw Jonpu thinking about keenly. I noticed because he began asking Kefri for more general-purpose hero items, instead of human killers. So this Empire Stella looked at the human lands. What do you have in mind? The war to free ourselves from the demons will not end. Not with how they bend the system to its will. We will need warriors. We will need equipment. The myriad worlds will supply them. I see. Stella said. It is like that. Myelga's priests of Malas adapted surprisingly easily. I still wondered who Malas was, whether Malas corresponded to any of the religions of Treehome. Gaia, Nera, Hawa, Ava. Those are the main four of Treehome. There were a few smaller ones, but their presence has been minor, and it's hard to tell whether they are real gods, or just fake ones. Then on the Satria, there's Hawa's gods. Then, on Delveard, the dwarf world, the dwarves, so far, didn't seem to believe in any of the gods we know of. Looking at the trend, there may be more than 10 gods, scattered over a vast area. The gods may be able to exert significant power over a set of core worlds, but a much more reduced presence over the rest. An empire gearing up for a war, but I can't help but think about the day after. You make it sound like we will win. We will, Stella said, unsure of herself. But I hope there is something for the people, after all of this. That we become a post-scarcity society, where everyone lives at peace, and can decide to live the lives they want. That will happen after. Will you let go? Yes, I said. I was sure I would. I'd be more than happy to shed the mantle. If life was no longer at risk of extinction. If forests and my trees are allowed to prosper, why do I want to meddle in all this shit? It's pointless. The squabbles of life against each other. Pointless. I don't care for it. But I have to, because I need them to win this fight. Stella looked at the growing empire, and sighed. It was a mess. I am torn whether that's a good thing. Kay watched as the city of Freshka fell asleep that night. It was getting dark and the skies were clear. There were lights that littered the city. It is said that Freshka could be seen from miles away. The sprawling mess of Freshka's city, at times, never seemed to sleep. The streets glowed from the colorful lights. Magical stones, not fully formed crystals, were somehow converted into magical lights through the inventive manufacturing processes of crafters and enchanters. The crystal shortfall due to the manufacturing of bombs significantly drained the traditional supply of crystal-based lights, so cities such as Freshka and many others found alternatives. Some cities used a type of glowing bug that is specifically bred to provide lighting. Some cities found glowing trees and plants, which provided much-needed lighting. Others reverted back to fires. With the huge variety of woods these days, there are a certain variety of slow-burning woods that give enough light. Some just embed a light spell into various types of magical material, to cause them to emit light. But this required a mage to constantly maintain lights throughout the city, instead of materials that could draw in ambient energy. Freshka was still busy at night, but traffic was less heavy than daytime. The city's resource demands were so high that logistics guilds resorted to moving goods at odd times to maximize efficiency. Kay dodged a convoy of beetles. The Valtrian order leased cargo ferry beetles to the various merchants' guilds for commercial use, and they were a large source of income for the order. Cheap, magically sustained, and hardy, they significantly reduced the need for horses for goods, but most kingdoms, especially those that fear Eons' retribution, still maintained their own stables and horses. Just in case. Dinner was over, and there were streets filled with bars and clubs. It was a scene that sometimes reminded her of home. People everywhere still have a need for entertainment, especially those of the flesh. Taverns were noisy at this time. Past the noisy commercial streets, she walked into one of the quietest, most privileged corners of Freshka. She arrived at her destination. It was a large mansion. Quiet. She knocked on the gate. The gate opened magically. Lady K. An order guard stood at the guardhouse. There was also a maid waiting for her. You arrived earlier than expected. Shall take you in. She was escorted into a quiet waiting room. Tea was served, along with some fruits. The walls had paintings of places. Loausan walked into the room. Thanks for dropping by. The crystal golem smiled at the master of the house. Loausan and Loausan didn't live together. Her mother lived a few doors down the street. They talked about Arlissa, how Arlissa's still spending her time with adventurer stuff. About Loausan's son, Lauda. Both Arlissa and Lauda are more than 100 years old now, and both as half-elves, their lifespans were going to be shorter than Loausan, unless they gained a lot of levels. Still, they should live until at least their 200 to 300s if all goes well, unlike Artie who died so much younger. Despite being a quasi-royalty of Freshka, Lauda founded his own small magical entity that focused on research and ruins. He didn't want to be too closely associated with the order, even if they still received order's funding. Unlike his mother and grandmother, who were still order members till this day. Partly because he saw how Arlissa went through a rebellious phase and essentially burned bridges with many of her old friends. What about you? What you been up to? Kay asked. I visited the Northern Islands recently, to meet Mila and Alexis. Oh, them. How are they? Kay said with subtle contempt. She still struggled to fit them into the plans. Even Ken didn't really want to include them, given their complicated past with Eon. They are fine. They took my advice to bunker up well. The North's growing well, the cities feel a lot more prosperous since I last saw them a few years ago. The vassal and guild wars didn't hurt them as badly as the rest. The vassal wars have mostly come to a standstill. The resource demands of the Great Comet attack drained much of the fire out of the war, and now that it has de facto ended, both sides settled into a comfortable ceasefire and status quo that neither wanted to restart. There might be an incident or flare-up that causes it to resurface, but for now, both sides are focused on licking their wounds and preparing for the eventual resumption of hostilities. Crystals also began to trickle back into the market. Kay looked at Loausan, and then dropped the question on her mind. Loausan, would you be willing to take up arms again? She paused, realizing Kay's question was serious. Why? Your children are old now. You no longer have to care for them like you used to. You have free time, and now, more than ever, we need you to do what Jura once did. Be on the front lines once more, and be one of the pillars of our world. Loausan closed her eyes briefly. Is this request from Patriarch Lumu for Edna? No. Me and maybe Stella. Kay answered. Of all the elves from the first days of Freshka, only you remain. Well, and your mother, but she is not a warrior. Roma's around. Kay grinned. You know it's not the same. You are the first. The first true Valthorn. That should be Jura. He's dead. Kay said. I believe Eon would still give you a soul-strengthening seed if you ask for it. For decades you were at level 85, there's probably some overflow experience in you that would. Loausan looked at her room. You want me to abandon the comforts of my beautiful home, and head back out there in the wilderness, battling demons and monsters? Yes. Because you are special, Loausan. Till this day there is no one with your tier blessings. Sure, there are many others with the lesser variants of blessed by the soul tree, but knowing the system, there is an unspoken value as the first blessed one of Eon. You are the first, and that grants you a weight you can wield. Loausan closed her eyes. Tell me what's really on your mind. Kay sipped her tea, and allowed the question to linger a bit before she spoke her mind. Eon needs moral guidance. There are the domain holders, but we know he needs more than that. He needs a bit of your presence. You have history and a past. A bond few others can claim to have. A bond that has turned distant. All I see are your internal struggles, Loausan. Kay answered. You're doing nothing with the rest of your life and you know it. You had just reason when you wanted to care for Lauda, but those days are over. Long over. What if I don't live up to that? There are so many with far better innate talent. The domain holders are all incredible people in their own ways. Is that what you fear, Loausan? To try once more and find yourself not worthy? Loausan closed her eyes. In many ways, it was a crisis of self-confidence. She didn't answer. Kay continued. You once said to Eon that you wanted to be a hero. We now know that the path to power exists. Edna is close to that point. It is no longer an impossibility. Not like your earlier days. Eon's access to the other realms enables opportunities for growth we never had before. Loausan, please. It's time to give that old dream of yours another chance. Jura once said your dream was foolish. But even he didn't see how things developed. Loausan listened, her heart swirling. A part of her was convinced. What's your interest in this? The golem laughed. Must everything be about interests? But you have an interest in this. I'd like to see an end to this. Properly. I feel sorry for those like me, that we are on this treadmill of endless fighting, summoned to fight in worlds that don't know us. Lies. Loausan countered. That's bullshit. The golem smirked. Kay closed her eyes, and then spilled the beans. I look at Arlissa and you, and see different versions of wasted potential. Arlissa is one where she couldn't take the expectations and crumbled. You could in some, but you chose to walk away. We've known each other for years, decades, centuries. Loausan, ever since the day you trained us, protected us and got us to level, back when we first met in that Dwarven city, in the eastern continent. That day, almost 130 years ago, in my eyes, you were always a hero. You can still be one. With Eon's resources, I have no doubt about it. Loausan stared at Kay. Both of them looked at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Eventually, Loausan let out a long sigh. I have a lot of catching up to do. 273. Watching plants grow. Void layers. Stella felt it immediately, as Eon said he would select the dark void. The world twisted and distorted ever so slightly, as if the entire world was an old cathode ray tube television that just experienced an interruption to its signal. The world was the same but different. There were now layers to things. Eon immediately mentioned the term filters, as if everything was photography filters. That was an acceptable way of looking at things, but Stella wondered whether it was more appropriate to see things at different levels of magnification and zoom. That this was the world at different levels of zoom and magnify. Even Treehome looked different once Stella applied the void layers. It was just plain nothingness in some, and some others something else. Stella wondered whether this was some kind of magical version of seeing quantum entanglement. That objects here are tied to some other objects far away, and the void layers merely rearrange the world in accordance with how things are entangled together. The void layers shifted things about. Each layer moved the position of the different worlds in wildly different positions, and incredibly, they are all true at the same time. If teleportation was possible, in short, an ability to cross vast distances through linking two locations together, why wouldn't it be possible to have naturally occurring variants? This was the worlds and realms cut up and pasted again in different places. A puzzle with multiple possible answers. Each world is a puzzle piece, and each layer a different acceptable variation of how the puzzle was solved. Depending on which layer, a world could be infinitely far away, or just next door. Stella stared as her mind flipped through the different layers, and watched. She could only process about 15, no, about 20 layers. She may have access to them, but her mind could not process those that were still too different. It hurt just trying to look at them, and she didn't even know why. Your nose is bleeding, Lady Stella. One of the Void Archmages, Veter, commented. Veter too had gained access to the void layers, and he only managed to see 6 of the layers before his mind began to feel the strain. I need Patrick's help, Stella commanded, as she walked into the special brain augmentation tree designed to expand her mental processing capacity. The minds linked with hers, as she attempted to push the edges of the void layers. Incredibly, the moment she could see it, it didn't take her more mental energy to see it again. Once she got it, she got it. 23 layers. Darn it. Stella emerged exhausted, and sipped on a fruit punch filled with nutrients prepared right outside. The Archmage, Veter, nodded. Shouldn't push it too hard, Lady Stella. A few of the lesser void mages had bad nosebleeds and had to be under healer's watch. Stella shrugged. The void worlds. Do you see it? One of them. Veter nodded. The Order had about 7 void archmages now, though none of them close enough to get to the domains, yet. They would have to participate in combat, perhaps intentionally triggering demonic mothers and use their void energies on the Black Sun's shards. I can see 2 different layers with them, Stella frowned. In some versions of the void layers, the world was entirely of a different color. As if these were special worlds, and they contained worlds entirely unseen on any other layers. These were hidden in the gaps of the void sea. The equivalent of folders and files that were hidden from view through some administrative rights, and no matter how the files get shuffled around, these hidden files remain. Hidden. Veter nodded. Preparations to visit is underway, though our collective view is that we should get over the meteor remnants. Stella understood. I agree. Tempting as it may be, it is not the right time to jump to these void worlds now. Veter breathed a sigh of relief. Eons node seeds. They could be sent to these void worlds. The void domain holder paused. It was true. But right now, they were spoilt for choice. With the expanded star map provided by the rescued Zeratin, they could see even more worlds that were linked to Delveard. Then, on the other side of Satria, there's the Hawa-controlled worlds. Stella knew they were close to the gods, because of how Hawa's power permeated through the world of Satria. That was also another front for exploration. They really didn't have enough void mages to go around. Not just that, they didn't have enough domain holders to explore the world safely. Year 267. Delveard. What do you think? Lumuf asked as he guided the Dwarven Lord Sundus through the small town. It was a relatively run-down, undeveloped place, but the local dwarves still built a small town here. Here, in this small dwarven town of Odios, with no resources of worth, they were not worth the attention of the nearby dwarven nations. Sundus, a relatively young dwarven lord from the Freshlands Treaty College, nodded. Can be done. But I will require assistance. There's a lot of construction to do, and I will need the triology priests to back me up. I'll need some time to convince the dwarves to accept our rule. Lumuf glanced at Kaffa. Kaffa nodded. I'll handle it, Patriarch. My avatar nodded. I'll leave the responsibilities for this world to you, Kaffa. It appears I am needed elsewhere. The lizard person gave a salute. I won't let you down. I know you won't. But do not fear failure. We will inevitably fail somewhere. Even Eon fails. Lumuf smiled and looked back at Sundus. Lord Sundus, I'll return to Treehome and arrange the resources. The Delveard force was not a full invasion army, unlike 3 worlds. We deployed almost 30,000 Valthorns and Valtrian Order operatives throughout the human kingdoms, in order to manage the transition period and enforce our rule. At about 100 people, it was pretty much a small, but elite reconnaissance force. But with Kaffa around, the likelihood of threats that could threaten them was fairly minuscule. Sundus was one of 5 dwarven lords recruited from Treehome for the task. Each of them will be assisted by about 20 others elites, as bodyguards, spies, and also to act on their instructions. They would each claim one of these smaller dwarven towns, as these towns do not have a high-ranked lord leading them. The 5 would then form a shadow alliance, acting in concert with the rest of the Valthorns. Once a certain scale was achieved, the plan was that I would deploy one of my node trees in Sundus Town. As the situation on 3 worlds and the human kingdom stabilizes over the next few years, we would then have more resources to redirect to Delveard, and properly begin our colonization process. Of what we know of Delveard so far, we have 2 actual goals, and 1 optional goal. The main one, in my brief assessment of Delveard, was to properly capture the Dwarven academies of Delveard. These craftsmen and smithing academies train a lot of the crafters that worked on their war machines, and if we could maneuver our FTC-trained Dwarven lords into a position where they controlled these academies, that would be ideal. The second one was to gain access to a stable supply of these sunsteels and sunmetals, and conduct experiments on how to better use these new materials for our war against the demons. The third one was to recruit the dwarves for our war. I would like to channel their thirst for war towards the demons. That should bring about some semblance of peace and unity to the Delveard dwarves. If not, we would like to convert the dwarves into our war suppliers, providing assistance to our forces. Right now, the Valthorns' manufacturing processes are strong, but some variety of goods, and an expansion of our total military-industrial complex would allow us to mount more attacks and reduce our lag time between attacks. We felt this keenly with the Demon's Comet, where we had to tap into all our crafters and manufacturers to make sufficient bombs. Even then, it felt insufficient. It took us too long to ramp up our production, and our bombs were still not good enough. As an institution, we will learn from our mistakes, and get better in the art of fighting demons. We will roll with the punches, and hit back as hard as we can. Treehome. Back on Treehome, the situation was calm. More fragments emerged from the void, and during this time the heroes got some additional practice with the meteors and their tree mechs. Then we finally had one that carried a part of the Demon King Multipus. It was fairly small, and the heroes annihilated the creature easily. So far, so good. None of the meteors have gotten past our first layer of defenses. But the bulk of the meteors should only reach us in about 3 years' time. Our space-based defenses would be truly tested then. Here, Kay held out the strange seed in her hand. Loausan trembled slightly as she touched it, and consumed it. I remember when Jura ate it for the first time, and felt like his soul was on fire. Loausan immediately went and rested on a bed. I feel queasy. I was told it's a common occurrence. She slept for a day, and when she woke up, her soul weighed more. So how many levels did you gain? Kay asked as she came to check on her friend. I was told some folks have overflow levels. Level 98, Loausan said, trembling slightly. I seem to have done a lot since I hit my peak. Darn. 13 levels is pretty good. I hit level 100 some time ago, but it's getting pretty damn hard to level outside of the dungeons. I'll take you with me. Loausan paused. When I was sleeping, I was thinking about this, about what I am doing. What? Kay looked back. What if one day we have to fight him? Kay shook her head. I'd rather not get to that point. We bend it, we mend it, but I'd rather not end it. That's an ending well regret. Loausan looked out of her home, and into the streets. She wore Valthorn armor, custom made. Her position in the society meant many gave her special rights and access, even when she didn't ask for it. It's been a while since I've visited dungeons. Kay smirked. Well, it'll get easier with time. Throughout Treehome, with the winds of the vassal wars behind us, trade and mostly normal life resumed. Piracy, a problem we've pretty much allowed to occur due to the leveling it generated, came back in full swing, this time putting the pirates against their former clients. This time, adventurers participated in the defense of the guilds. Adventurers generally tried to stay out of the war between the guilds and empires of the other continents, simply because their nature of work wasn't designed for regular combat, even if their high levels made them valuable irregular units. Most empires and guilds dangled huge amounts of money in the past, during the heated years of the vassal wars, and hoped to entice adventurers to support their war. It worked, to some degree, but some adventurers didn't want to offend either the guilds or the empires and decided to stay out of it. Once more, nothing from you. Why do you endure these pirates? It's been 2 decades since the day Emperor Erinuel ascended to the throne of his holy empire, but we still occasionally spoke. With my reach, it was not impossible for me to contact him even in the safety of his palace. The range of my telepathic abilities has increased, a result of the cumulative increase in levels over the years. Why not? It is only the natural course of mortals to attempt to subvert known ways of achieving wealth. Why do you expect me to do something? True. Sometimes, I think nothing is exactly what you want to do. Erinuel chuckled in his throne room. There was no one present, he had chased them out whenever we spoke. But I know some of the Emperor's aides are secretly listening, and he knows about it too. But a semblance of privacy is better than none. By most measures, his holy empire prospered since his ascension. His elevated powers brought prosperity, as the average health improved, farming yields improved, and somehow, the earth itself rewarded them with new mineral discoveries. A king or an emperor bends the luck and destiny of his nation. Earthly minerals and resources are certainly not finite in the traditional, earthly sense. System shenanigans can trigger the creation of new mineral veins, just as how the flow of magical ley lines changes the mineral structure and qualities of the rocks it passed through. To a certain extent, there is a friendly competition between us. Erinuel wants his empire to catch up with the central continent, and for most part, I don't get in the way. With our domain holders, we remain so far ahead that it would be difficult for them to even think of competing. I believe it is the open communication between the two of us that allowed this to happen. As the Order expands into a multiplanar institution, our capacity to monitor and to truly control all the minutiae of local policies and politics is limited. Already, Stella informed the Council of the presence of at least 15 more worlds that could be accessed directly from Treehome, due to the newly unlocked void layers. 15 worlds. Just from us directly through the new void layers. My council gathered, and I wondered whether we should just send spies to them directly. But with domain holders at a shortage, using my level 100s was an elevated risk because they lacked the protections a domain holder had. In a way, it was ironic that I didn't hesitate a full army to demon worlds, but I hesitated with these alien worlds. This was partly because demon worlds, for most part, felt like a known quantity. We were expecting demons, not other domain holders or gods. The range of possible enemies were somewhat predictable. If there was a domain holder hiding in the world of demons, they would be hiding really well. Gods, well, we don't expect them in the world of demons, because gods could easily defeat demons on their own home worlds. I hear from the grapevine that you're exploring more worlds. Erinuel said. It wasn't that much of a secret. We explored worlds, and we publicly announced that we want to explore more worlds. It was a recruitment pitch, really. People who have that exploratory streak would join us. The curiosity and desire to learn was a valuable quality to have. What I am truly afraid of, with all these new worlds, is the discovery of a potentially hostile civilization with the ability to travel through the multiverse. If they possessed mind-reading abilities, that meant only my domain holders were the only ones that could interact with them with high certainty that their minds are not compromised. I am always exploring. There are many worlds out there, and we hope to find allies among them. If you find our God, let him know I'd like to speak to him. Ironically, we were. The Holy Emperor Erinuel was blessed, by the combined blessings of Gaia and Hawa's archpriests, to create a king above kings. We are close to one of them. When we do speak to him, I want to be there. Erinuel said, I am a holy emperor of an empire, created in Gaia and Hawa's name. But in the end, I want to know whether they care. Whether there is purpose in this foolish conflict that we inherited from the earlier set of divine communions. Whether we can end this long-standing conflict, and work together. I wasn't sure. I didn't know whether Hawa would be friendly, or hostile. Of all the 4 major gods of Treehome, personally, I think it's most likely that Gaia was hostile. Gaia didn't even like spirit trees in his temple grounds. I still remember their priests kicking me out of their temple's garden. What if he doesn't want to speak to you? I asked. Then there is no point for this faithful one to be faithful, is it? You're the Holy Emperor, surely your faith goes beyond such interaction. Is your faith so weak that it crumbles from being spurned? I countered. I didn't know why I was testing his faith, either, but I suspect I didn't like how transactional it all sounded. There are those that believe all the frills of our society's interactions are stripped out, it comes down to our expectations. Each transaction leads to current or future benefit, or fear of retaliation. Many people behave well, because they know being nice has future payback. If there were no future consequences, only a select few will be nice just to be nice. Emperor Erinuel chuckled. Praise Hawa and Gaia, for I am a fool that can't see their greatness. If a god doesn't speak to me, even as a holy emperor, what more do I expect of my subjects? What more do I expect of the men who I send to their deaths in his name? I continue to believe in him, for their ways are as mystical as the darkness of the skies above, but a holy emperor is holy only because he is the conduit. He is the link between the heavens and the earth. If he doesn't speak to me, then I must abdicate my throne and choose someone who will be granted an audience with our God. Ah, that was a sensible angle. He is a holy emperor, because he must speak for his God. Without the ability to speak to his God, he is nothing but a normal emperor. It is a fairly common expectation in medieval societies that the emperor is the God's incarnate. What is God's hand, if the hand cannot see God? I see your avatar, the patriarch and the voice of Eon, and wonder where I stand. I suppose even emperors experience imposter syndrome. Satria, the home of the 7 Hawa relics. I doubt Hawa would actually refuse to see you. The high priest said. It was the 6th high priest they met so far, and of the ones they met, 2 had refused to entertain them. The high priest of Museo was willing to speak for them, as was the high priestess of Pash. 2 in favor, 3 against. This high priest shook his head. I will not oppose it. But I will not support you. It is His Eminence's choice. We merely request for the delivery of the message to Hawa. The 6th one abstained. He frowned. Sorry. This is as much as I am willing to do. It is the matters of our God, and a mere mortal as myself would not step in. It is a common stance. Those that opposed generally had the same stance, that with the matter of God, Edna would be the one to seek out an audience herself. The priests have no say, and should not be seen as working for another god. Even if it was just the act of delivering a message, all matters around their god was dealt with velvet gloves, and they would not dare to even consider modifying old customs and processes. Faith. It did so much good to their world. It gave them protection and gave them structure. But there are times Edna hated dealing with them. Can you imagine our own priests turning out this way? Izar said with a scowl. They could. Edna responded earnestly. We better remind the patriarchs and matriarchs not to be such stubborn fools. It's a balance between accessibility and mysticism. Rune said with a sigh. The ranger archer was surprisingly knowledgeable. With more access, God loses mysticism. Edna frowned. That's so stupid. A god's presence is self-evident. Anyone standing in front of Eon knows that. Edna remembered the day when Ava descended for an audience, and she remembered how it felt. It was truly an unmistakable experience. Those who were there know who they saw, and no words can explain it. A god is a god, and there was no need for all this pomp and process. Before divinity, there really was nothing else to compare to. But Eon is not in front of everyone. Rune countered. Think of it this way. If Hawa is so freely accessible, then it so happens that one can no longer speak to Hawa. Will Hawa suffer from a loss of faith? Therefore, the base assumption for a faith is that speaking to a god is only in very, very special situations. Edna realized Rune had a point. If the god was always seen as there, then suddenly disappearing would be bad for them. But if he is always unseen, then whether he is or not, is of no consequence to the faith. But we are asking for an audience. And I bet kings and emperors have asked for an audience too. That 2 of 6 are willing to speak for us is actually pretty good. The council of Hawa high priests numbered 7 in all. 7 relics, and 7 high priests. But this means we don't have a majority. Edna frowned. We need Lumuf here to convince that old woman to change her mind. 274. Food for thought. Year 267, Part 2. Delveard. Sundus found it quite easy to bribe the existing Dwarven lord to resign from his post, and hand it over to him. After all, he was the lord of a small town worth nothing. A bit of money and high-quality equipment did more for him than his position ever did. So, Sundus soon found himself lord of the small Dwarven town of 2,000 dwarves. They worked at a mine that produced regular iron, and they had forges to make high-quality steel, which they sold to the other Dwarven cities. For food, some of the dwarves farmed. It was a matter of great reluctance for the Delveard dwarves, since they didn't like farming all that much. On Treehome or on places like the eastern continent where the dwarves had their hidden underground cities, they loved to fund the other races to produce all their food and wheat or buy their food from others. It was for this reason Dwarven cities are rarely mono-racial cities, because they needed some people to be farmers, and would treat them well to do what they were meant to do. It was a productive, symbiotic business transaction. The dwarves supplied high-quality equipment and ale, and the humans supplied the wheat, barley, and rye. The dwarves were also stockier, sturdier, and generally, better brawlers than the humans, so they often provided protection to the human farmers, who also enjoyed how the dwarves generally stuck to their word. On Delveard, there are no humans. And so the dwarves had to do their own farming. In most dwarven towns, most dwarves do their own small-scale farming, where their produce is enough for themselves, and for the brews they make. Dwarven homes in Delveard usually came with a small patch of land next to their existing homes where they cultivated some of their farms, or in more structured cities, there were designated shared lands where the irrigation was centralized. But in most cases, large-scale farms were extremely rare, except in certain dwarven cities where there is a functional slave class or underclass of dwarves. This was an underclass of dwarves that were forced to do farming. There's an opportunity here, Kafa said to Sundus, and Sundus readily agreed. A monocultural dwarven society isn't able to do what they need to do well. The dwarves farmed, and they tried their very best to automate the process through large magical machines meant to run their farms. This was an option available to the strongest of towns, because automated farming golems were fairly difficult to make, because for dwarves who were so picky with the quality of their wheats, the unskilled golem's output was still pretty bad. A farmer with skills and levels produced high-quality food. Materials for brews. But dwarves didn't like being farmers, and those that did are few and far between, and so they become rather precious folks. Despite this, their society looked poorly on them. A dwarven farmer's social status in Delveard was shit, so most of them doubled up as brewers, which was a better ranked position. Still, the split focus and the micro scale meant farming output in Delveard was low. Despite farming being an absolute necessity for survival, dwarves in Delveard generally avoided taking up too many farming skills. They would take one or two just to ensure that they had some viable crops, but no more. In fact, most of them prefer to subsist on a diet of hunted meats, foraged berries and fruits. So Delveard dwarves tend to base their cities and towns near large hunting grounds, large forests with a decent amount of berries and fruits, or near rivers where they could engage in fishing. But the options are fairly limited. If we bring in an entirely new race of people to serve as farmers, that is a risk of its own. The two discussed their options. Disease, environment, and we would essentially alter the racial composition of Delveard. In some ways, we were already altering it with our actions, but large-scale import of an alien race to a world like Delveard did feel a little wrong. It felt like we were introducing a potentially invasive species, even though we already are an invasive species. The alternative was to engage in import of the common necessities of the Delveard dwarves. We had the ability to produce large quantities of high-quality food on TreeTree. In short, we could be the remote breadbasket of Delveard, and pretty much throw the economic balance of Delveard upside down. In a way, we really had three main options, though our ultimate solution was likely a combination of them. We could start introducing a migrant race to do farming. We also could use my trees and my blessing abilities to boost natural food sources. We could import. Actually, Sundus asked, what's Eon's time horizon for Delveard? Do we want to take over this world in 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, or 100? 50. But within 10 years we want a solid foothold with at least 2 to 3 cities. Kafa said, the things we want in Delveard are people, skills, academies. Things that would be destroyed if we acquired them by force. Our preferred strategy here is to trade and win over, similar to how Eon won over the rest of the central continent with trade and pretty much overwhelming power during Freshka's first century. Sundus looked at the domain holder, and scratched his head. You need to make yourself into a scary person, if that's the case. Are you going to be the stick that looms over us all? The lizardfolk frowned. That's still a strategy that we'll need to shape over time. Sundus countered. Lord Kafa, I hope you don't find this offensive, but I believe you are ill-suited for this assignment. If Alchemist Alka is here, we should have a significantly better time. His sheer presence as a domain-tier dwarven alchemist should convince many to join us. The lizardfolk actually froze momentarily, but he was willing to entertain the idea, and as the thought swirled in his mind, he eventually nodded. You are right, but Alka's resurrection is still a decade away. For now, I will have to suffice. The dwarven lord could only sigh. I guess so. All the other dwarven lords successfully took control of their new towns. There was hardly any resistance, not when the right amount of money was paid. These towns were worthless, but with the Valthorn presence, all of them dwarves selected from our own academies, our work began. In some ways, we gave dwarves huge options. With access to the wider Valtrian order network, the dwarves of TreeTree could select duties that they were most suited for, and with a large enough net, we could have Dwarven, druids, alchemists, blacksmiths, and builders. We deployed them in these 5 towns, and used their skills to give our new towns advantages. New walls, improved yields from the foraged berries. As the year reached its end on Delveard, Sundus finally said his town was ready for the node. And so, I deployed my first node tree on Delveard. Mountain World. Adrian, the last hero of Mountain World, prepared for battle. In a year, another demon king would arrive. 15 years seemed too short, or too long, depending on how you see it. 15 years was enough for a human child to become a war-ready soldier. Because on this war-obsessed Mountain World, a life of war starts early. 15. 10. Child soldiers aplenty. Will you be calling them back? Lumuf looked at Mountain World. He was slated to visit Satria too, but that was a risk. I thought about it. It was a suboptimal choice, and the exploration of Satria took longer than I expected. Partly because I wasn't expecting to find a world touched by the gods. We've scouted out the connected demon world, and found it to be some kind of wolf world. The demons took the form of gigantic wolves, but with elemental powers. Each of the slightly different variants of the horned demonic wolves controlled either fire, earth, or lightning. The demonic champions were shapeshifting demonic wolves that possessed a demonic form. They were either wolf form or demon form, where they were the stereotypical winged demons with horns. It was amusing to witness the demons with shapeshifting ability, so I captured some of them for research. Lumuf would have balked at this assignment decades ago, but now, capturing a demon champion and overwhelming it with mana. This assignment was no sweat. It was nothing next to being stuck in a demon comet. We hauled 3 demon champions back to Treehome through the void gates, and sent them into my gigantic biolabs. That way, Lumuf looked as the group of Valthorns carried the pacified demon champion. The wolves have been trapped in magical stasis, in a kind of crystalline prison invented by Alka a few years before the comet. It was meant as an anti-hero countermeasure. As a prison for heroes, it's still insufficient, but it proved effective in weakening demons too, because the combination of anti-mana glass used throughout its structure and magical formations drained the demons of their magical energies. Once upon a time, this amount of demonic mana would prove too much. But we have changed since then. Advancements, all the little steps along the way added up, and now we have prisons able to subdue a weakened demon champion. The Valthorns walked through the tunnel. Here, the Valley of the Unrodden, the presence of magic was sometimes suffocating. The Valthorns gripped their equipment, and their breaths were heavy. Eon could have opened the valley up long ago. But it remained the way it was, with only a small opening where Eon's canopy reached into the skies. The rest of the valley remained hidden under the hardened, root-reinforced walls. The sludge was long gone, transformed into regular dirt and soil. But here in the valley, it was a land of magic. Each tree here was slightly different, and anyone with magical sight would instantly notice the huge cacophony of signals throughout the valley. This was Eon's extended mind, large numbers of Eon's assistant trees whose sole purpose is to augment Eon's sight over the worlds. There are smaller versions of these orchards of artificial minds around each of Eon's clones. But here lies the greatest of them all. Lumuf stopped, and looked at a grotesque existence that looked like human brains cut out and piled into the shape of a tree. Patrique, the Titan Grand Mind Tree. And there were 2 of them. There were crystals and gems in them, turned into strange shapes. The crystals and gems were used as connective tissue. Precious metals turned into a web of links throughout the strange tree. Lumuf didn't remember the other one's name. But Eon planned for more of them. It hummed, and for someone with Lumuf's senses, he could hear a constant buzz as Patrique thinks. But this was not where they would be. There was a section where Eon conducted demonic experiments. Deeper. There were massive trees here, but to say they are trees would be a stretch of definition. There were all a massive hollow log that could be covered, filled with Eon's vines. They would thoroughly examine any creature thrown inside, though its ability to study materials was significantly weaker. Here, in the depths of Eon's valley, there were no concerns that the weakened demon champion could cause damage. Eon's presence alone petrified the demonic creature, and his vines pulled the struggling wolf demon into the log. It would be torn apart, and eventually, transformed with Eon's mana. Such as normal. One of them was already transformed in the field. But for those that are still purely demonic, Eon wanted to peek into them. Eon would learn from them, and often, new discoveries are reflected in the beetles. Shapeshifting beetles would be a welcome addition to Eon's arsenal. Lumuf stood, and watched. No. He could feel it as Eon's vines began to work on the wolf demon. He could feel the vines pierce the skin and hide of the creature, and felt it crawl through its body and grab what's left of the demon champion's dried soul. It was vivid, and Eon loved studying creatures that it never encountered. Across all worlds, Valthorn and Valtrian Order operatives continued to harvest and collect new specimens for studies, a tradition that started long ago during the days of New Freka. Eon had reached the wolf demon's body, and Lumuf knew Eon had just made a copy of the creature's dried soul spring. He would attempt to rebuild it on Lavaworld later on. Lumuf noticed the other Valthorn operatives' trembling hands as they pushed the second crystal prison close to the log. They've done this many times, but for non-domain holders, they know this is face to face with the jaw of the beast. They know it is safe. They know what to do. But fear is primal. Lumuf merely gave them a knowing nod. They have to face their struggles. It is safe. Eon would not hurt them. As Eon finished digesting what was left of the third demon champion, he concluded his research. Biolabs were one of Eon's favorite tools, and he loved experiments. He was also eager to study the Delveard dwarves and the humans of Satria, but it'll have to wait for a while. Silver weapons will be needed, I remarked. This message was delivered to the Mountain World hero, Adrian. He visibly facepalmed. Oh great. I am facing werewolves. Are the others coming to help me? Only Prabhu, Colette and Kefri. Chung. Adrian shook his head. Don't have to explain. I get it. Werewolf demons were surprisingly hardy, resistant to magic and also blunt weapons. But like their nature, silver somehow pierced through those defenses fairly easily. It wasn't too hard to modify some of our existing weapons to incorporate a bit of silver, and many of our existing weapons already have some silver element within them. My void mages triangulated the location of arrival, and prepared for the battle. In our usual way, the surplus weaponry from the demon's comet were redirected for this purpose. Lumuf and the other domain holders would return for this. Their adventures on those new worlds would have to wait for a while. Satria, Edna, Rune and Izar explored all the relic cities, but they eventually concluded that Patriarch Lumuf would have to be present in order to convince the other two head priests to switch sides. The head priests of the 7 relic cities met once a year for what is known as the Hawa's Circle. Hawa himself only selected the Hawa's champions after the Demon King arrived, and that was a few years more. In short, they have at least a few more years before Hawa would come. If they have to, they'd have to crash a meeting with Hawa's champion. Well, let's head back. Edna concluded. We need to be there for the fight with the wolf demon. Stella would open the portal from the other side. You don't want to say goodbye to the priestess. Izar teased. I bet she's going to hate you if you just disappear without telling her. Rune was about to roll his eyes. You promised her you'd take her on a trip. He gulped. Aw man, come on. I can't be taking a woman on a trip. Not when we're going back to fight demons. Edna laughed but nodded. Izar has a point. I think you need to be more sensitive to how a woman of her age thinks. Let's take her with us. What if she's a security risk? Rune countered. She's a high priestess of Hawa. We're revealing information about ourselves. Agree on that too. But at least, tell her you're going away. I know she's trying to observe you even now. Rune flinched. It was true he was notified that his domain blocked attempted scrying. But there were ways around it. She attempted to scry locations close to them, and it was possible to do so when their locations were not secret. He frowned, but nodded. I'll send her a message. I am leaving your world. Rune said via a magical message. He activated an item that allowed him to have a magical conversation. Also, you can stop scrying now. The spell only facilitated a voice conversation, partly because Rune didn't really want to see her. You know. Of course. I keep getting notified it's blocked. If you're leaving, can you take me with you? No. The unspoken reason was clear. She was a risk, and they didn't want to cannot expose our location. My god is not a threat. She answered, clearly sensing the cause of her rejection. We don't know about that. Rune said. Edna and Izar listened nearby. There really was not much point for privacy in such situations. I am certain of it. We have a common foe. I hope so. But until we are sure, we're not taking the risk. Rune countered. If you'd arrange for the audience. It's all about the audience. The priestess repeated. Fine. I'll tell Hawa. But if you get to speak to him, I want you to take me to your world. The ranger sighed. He wondered why he had this type of trouble. Look, it's not my decision. It's a collective decision as an organization. I cannot promise you that. Goodbye. The magical spell was cut off. There. Edna laughed. Well done, but I do think you need some relationship coach. The way you spoke to her was quite harsh. Rune shook his head. Why are you trying to matchmake me with a foreign priestess? Can't you just let me date Eons priestesses instead? I am not. It's your personal choice in the end. Edna nodded. Come. Let's get back and deal with a giant pup. 275. Security concerns. C275. Year 268. Delveard. The security situation in most of the newly controlled towns were stable. The dwarves were fairly respectful of power, and they voiced their disagreements and dissatisfactions in a straightforward manner. In the face of strength, they respected and accepted that, and so didn't make much of a fuss. These small towns didn't have much concept of pride in its identity as a town or nation state wasn't fully formed. This was due to the relatively short history, and the lack of unique selling point. As a result, the five lords from Treehome were generally free to consolidate their power and make changes. It's likely things would be trickier, with older dwarven nation states. These states and cities would have longer history, more pride, and generally, a stronger desire to keep control within itself. But for now, nothing much occurred. The void creatures found in the mines of the other dwarven cities were nowhere near the five towns we now controlled. But it wasn't that difficult to find them. The dwarves, incredibly, had a special class for it. Sunmetal Prospector. These dwarves seemed to have an inbuilt radar that detected the presence of these sunmetals whenever they approached a new land, and stronger, higher-leveled prospectors could even sense their presence just by standing on top of them. From our informants, it seems that the dwarven lords themselves usually have some prospecting, or mining classes, because of how valuable the sunmetal was to their war efforts. Sunmetal, in other words, was Delveard's gold. The void creatures were the dragons that guarded them. Large veins somehow generated and caused the creation of particularly strong void creatures, and in Delveard mythology, there were stories of the void creatures as the spirit of the sunmetal, expelled from their flesh due to their crimes. In those stories, the void creatures guarded the sunmetal veins like an obsessive spouse, and would fight tooth and nail to protect their bodies. In other regions of Delveard, another version of the story places the veins as the remains of an old dwarven god. The void creatures were the poisons that killed the old god, and now feasted on its remains. Kaffa found the stories fascinating, and traveled to learn more about Delveard. His levels and domain made his physique exemplary, and he used it to his full advantage, moving from place in place. We wanted to visit all the large kingdoms of Delveard, and improve our knowledge. One of the key concerns the Lumuf had was whether there was divine presence in this world. We wanted to find out who these dwarves worshipped, and whether there are other domain tier individuals. Most of the dwarves we met so far seemed to believe and worshipped a god called Eras. But Eras was more like a craft god, and it was a familiar name. We had records of Eras, as mentioned in the Margmarian recordings. But unlike the records in the Margmarian city, Eras' faith in the world of Delveard was more casual and unregulated. Here, the teachings of Eras were passed down from parents to children, and so were twisted in bits and pieces. What's left of the original Eras scriptures were scattered across the dwarven nations, but no one actually attempted to piece them together. In some ways, the dwarves didn't take Eras all that seriously, and the pious was a real minority. It is a blend of an old faith with dwarven superstition. One of the largest dwarven factory academies on Delveard was an institution called the Delveardian Yards. It was a large mountain that was hollowed out over the centuries, and home to the third largest war machines and factories on all of Delveard. It was, politically, a subordinate of the nearby dwarven kingdom of Ruthfjord, but in substance, the factory master of the Delveardian Yards was the true king of Ruthfjord. Even today, it is the Ruthfjord king's father that controlled the Delveardian Yards. Kaffa tapped the illusionary device, and it cloaked his presence. He could do so with his scales, too, so the illusionary device was made not to interfere with the functionality of his colorful scales. Colossal war machines stood motionless in the yards. Here, hundreds if not thousands of dwarven crafters worked on separate parts of the war machines. Some worked on their legs, some worked on their body, some worked on the weapons that would soon. Kaffa walked about untouched. In this factory academy where masters taught their apprentices, the sound of metals banging and hammers hitting steel was the background music. No one noticed the invisible lizard. He snuck through the vast academy, and then into the hangars located on another side of the hollowed-out mountain. They had at least 30 war machines just under maintenance, and another 10 more that seemed ready for use at any time. They had pilots, dwarven machine operators, each forming a bond with their gigantic war machines. The war machines had to be charged. They had large crystal power units, and the operators themselves supplied some of the war machines' power requirements. Just as sunmetals were used for joints, they also used some kind of sunmetal crystal mixture for batteries. I was tempted to steal one and even suggested it. I was fascinated. Such equipment and design were unseen on Treehome, and I believe Alka would love it. But I was interrupted. But what if this leaves a bad mark? Do we really want to start a relationship with these dwarves on the wrong foot? Some of my dwarven diplomats advised otherwise. I believe we can obtain this above board, through trades. Very well. Let's try trades, then. We could easily trade void weapons for it. My void mages produced enough void weaponry, but that's something we wouldn't reveal. Not yet. Kaffa soon learned that the kingdom of Ruthfjord controlled about 70 war machines. There were a few other kingdoms with such similar size. Most smaller kingdoms and city-states controlled 2 to 3 such war machines, and even those were of a lower quality than the giants. The war machines themselves had surprisingly powerful beam weapons, and the legs were pretty much stabbing weapons. By my own estimates, 2 of these war machines could take down a demon walker. Their protections are rather weak. Kaffa noticed, as they mainly relied on the natural endurance qualities of the sunmetal and sunsteel. Most of them were focused on energy reflection spells. Kaffa's espionage continued, and he snuck through the Delvegardian yards easily. He quickly detected the presence of a hidden chamber, and entered it. The factory master worked on a super colossus. 10 legs and enough weapons to match 10 colossus, it was engineered for the factory master. It wasn't that unique. Kaffa's exploration of the other large factories and academies revealed that most kingdoms worked on some superweapon. Bigger, stronger. Each factory master wanted to go above and beyond a war machine. It seemed even dwarven kingdoms needed a trump card. His visit would be cut short. For now, he would return for another visit. Kaffa. Time to go back. Demon King coming. Rift emerging. The Demon King is departing from the core of the werewolf world. The void mages on the demon world now linked to Mountain World sent the message. I wonder how HTE Canary would react to another canine world, but the wolves of werewolf world were shapeshifters. I wondered what sort of people they had, when they were still populated. Well, moment we've been waiting for. Edna laughed as she took out a gleaming blade of silver. Everyone was armed with enough enchanted silver to properly stock a jeweler, but in many ways, it was a shame. We even modified our bombs to embed little bits of silver beads and alloys, in order to amplify their effectiveness. In theory, it should work. But every Demon King's skill set is unknown. Demon Kings could be resistant to things their demons were weak to. Adrian, the lead defender, prayed. He prayed to his friend. Even his older friends, those that passed away long ago. Demon King Marchos has arrived. The place of battle on Mountain World was a large forest. We've rigged the place with bombs. The werewolf champions emerged from the rifts, and were swiftly shot down. Then we all felt the Demon King's presence. It emerged from the rift, its fur was like a living liquid. Once we detected it, the bombs exploded. Edna and the domain holders prepared for battle. I was partly expecting the fight with Multipus first. The pulse of the chained explosions blasted upwards, and I knew it was slightly weaker. Without Alka's presence, some of his skills were inactive, and that impacted the strength of the bombs. The large forest was instantly transformed into a crater. It was a pity. I felt pain in my soul when such a large forest was leveled. But I would restore this forest later. I made a note to my artificial souls to do so. The wolf is coming. Marchos, the wolf-shaped demon king lunged for Adrian like a furious war god. It was wolf-shaped, but not a wolf, because that was when we saw a few more magical claws and limbs emerged out of nowhere. Stay back. Edna charged ahead, and her silver blade shone like a glorious full moon. She slashed, and the demon king recoiled. Her power was fully activated then, and she tanked the demon king's powerful claws. Each claw strike contained the power of a demon king, and though Edna took it like it was nothing more than a pillow strike, the aftershocks from each strike still left small craters around the domain holder. She landed a few slashes. Her silver blade left magical wounds on the demon king, but it was clear those wounds mended. The heroes continued to bombard the demon king with spells, and immediately noticed how lackluster their attacks were. Its magical resistance is astronomical. Prabhu frowned. Switching to blended magical spells. If magic didn't work, the heroes were each given a nation's arsenal of physical spears and projectiles. They would wrap these projectiles in their magic, and use them as bullets, empowered by their hero weapons. The heroes' magical attacks bombarded the wolf demon, and impaled it. Its fur was magically resistant, but physical weapons still hurt it quite a bit. I don't really get why silver weakened it, but I suppose it's some system shenanigans. The demon pulsed. We thought it was going to blow. But it didn't. Instead, it merely shape-shifted, and transformed into a different form. A smaller, much smaller demon. Faster. Smaller. Edna tried to step in the way, and slashed it. Edna traded a few blows, but the Demon King wasn't keen on fighting the domain holder. Instead, it looked around, and aimed at the 4 heroes present. It tried to battle Kefri, and soon realized Kefri's armor was too strong. Kefri, the scorpionoid heroine, was quite good at close-range combat, and her natural carapace could take more hits than most heroes. She traded blows with the second form, and the Demon King immediately realized it didn't want to engage Kefri in combat. It shifted, and tried to target the mages instead. But Prabhu and Colette were too close, and they were also protected by my domain holders, Lumuf, Kafa and Izar. No go. I watched it try to attack Rune and Johan, but my rangers' move speed meant they were able to maintain a distance. Marchos was trying to pick off the weakest member of the party, and domain holders were not its priority. It wanted heroes, and so, its sights landed back on Adrian. Edna immediately retreated. I don't like how it's looking at you. Adrian laughed. You think it'll get me? We don't know. It tried everyone and couldn't get far. Prabhu and Colette's combined bombardments meant they could sufficiently prevent the Demon King from getting close, and so that meant only Kefri and Adrian were in the melee range. Lumuf's with the mages, so it'll be with you. It also seemed quite afraid of Lumuf, and my avatar mode. So long as Lumuf was there, Marchos seemed to understand it wouldn't be able to get near the 2 mage heroes. Kefri immediately leapt over. Well, it's weakened, and looking to pick the weakest of us off. Who wants to be the bait? Adrian frowned. I suppose that's me, since it didn't seem to like fighting with you. They watched the Demon King dodge attacks from my ranged heroes, and my roots. It was surprisingly still speedy, and the rift above continued to release smaller wolves. Is that necessary? Lumuf asked, as he activated his Fury of the Avatar. I'll try to restrain it. The entire terrain was surrounded by roots, and for once, the gigantic wolf seemed tiny. It was a wolf trapped in what seemed to be a mess of vines and woody tentacles. Marchos immediately emitted an aura, a layer of black energy that formed around its body like a protective barrier. It briefly protected itself from all attacks, and my vines. A Demon King with shields. Lumuf smirked. It's been a while since I've seen a Demon King with shields. Well, let's go for it. Immobilized, despite its shields, the Demon King was sitting ducks. We charged our weapons, and waited for that protective layer to fade. Once it faded, we blew up the Demon King. Demon King Marchos has been slain. There was no explosive destruction. The Demon King left a core that was tainted by star mana, but that was no matter. The entire crater was seeded with crystals, as the remnants of the Demon King's corpse transformed into demolite. Well, time to clean shit up. Lumuf declared. The Valthorns quickly descended on the forest to mop up the residual energies. Adrian looked at Kefri. You know, I had the strange feeling like I was supposed to die today. Kefri laughed. You think too much. With so many other combatants present, you think you'd die today. Well, it's just a weird feeling. Like it was written in the stars, but it did not happen. Kefri frowned. Don't say such inauspicious things. There's still Multipus. I don't think so. It's inevitable that we will die. Adrian laughed. I just wonder when. The comet world floated through the vastness of the void sea. Its bubble of reality expanded slightly, very slightly. This was a world with no core remaining, and so its bubble of reality is maintained by my existence. I wonder whether only domain holders emit a bubble of reality, or whether it is something that all living creatures have. It floated by places. Darkness. Its movement in the void sea brought us even further away from the demons, and I wondered where it was headed. We've been working on manipulating an object's trajectory through the void sea for ages, and even now, we've not succeeded. With the void layers, we wonder whether this is even necessary. Perhaps, in one version of the void layers, the comet world was headed in the right direction after all. That's so optimistic. Stella laughed. But true. I countered. It's like falling upwards. The void sea defies all normal types of logic. The void sea is pretty much whatever your mind thinks it is. It's like a painting on a canvas. My void domain holder chuckled. I can't wait to start exploring the void layers. We need to hunt Multipus down and be done with this meteor storm. The Demon King is out there somewhere, on one of the meteor remnants. I doubt it was consumed by the void. It just didn't seem like a thing for Demon Kings. Chung was alone in his part of the world. He trembled, as his mind weighed on him. It wasn't the demon king of his world. And yet, when he heard that a demon king came for Mountainworld, his mind seemed to strain. A hero was compelled to fight demon kings. It wasn't that strong, if the demon king was of another world. But it tugged at his mind, and he lashed out. He abandoned his puppet state, and found a place in the mountains. There were no sapient beings here, only animals and monsters. He lashed out, his arrows blasted the surroundings. Everyone knew the area was off limits. It was where the archer hero went to blow off steam. The place was filled with craters and holes. I've not bothered to repair it, and left the mountainous region riddled with all the scars of his attacks. It happened more and more. Especially in recent years. I spied on him, and realized that he was slowly losing it. Conflict with this hero seemed inevitable, and the only one left on talking terms with him doesn't want anything to do with him. Internally, we prepared for conflict. We ran simulations of battle against the hero Chung. If he actually turned on us, the ideal state was a surprise attack. I didn't want to kill a hero. Yet, as his erraticism grew, I knew that it was inevitable. I only hoped that there wouldn't be too much collateral damage. 276. Interlude. Patching up. Interlude. It's been decades since she saw active duty, but Kay was right all along. A part of her wanted to go back, now that her kids have all grown up. It wasn't hard. It was only hard in her mind. What's worse, was that she knew it was her own mind working against her. Eons said once, apparently, from an old philosopher, that the mind is its own unmaking. It was true, and yet it still happened to her. There were things that were so clearly headed their way, and yet, the mind would refuse to do anything. She stretched. Her elven muscles and bones regained its old flexibility. It was magic. She'd even say it got stronger. Since she took the soul-strengthening seed, she felt she was more complete. More whole. Matters of the soul were hard to explain. The concept of being more whole, more complete, when the soul was already complete, seemed counterintuitive. But the soul can grow. The soul's density, its weight, its presence, more. When she was a child, Eon spoke to her at length about the nature of the soul. Of everyone in this city today, she remembered many small talks between her and TreeTree. Even now, she could feel him there, at the very edges of her mind. A door she could open at any time. A voice she could reach out and talk to. She remembered that Lumuf once said that if the mind was a house, Eon was like one of the rooms in his mind. It was there, and she felt it was apt. For her, it was a door. At times, it was like an invisible limb. It was that door that allowed her to sense Eon's return from the Rotted Lands. Long ago, during the days of her travels in the eastern continent, she remembered how the door wasn't even there. But these days, even in the northern islands, or the mountainous underground cities of the eastern continent, that door was still there. She knew what it meant. Eon's reach had covered the entire realm. She could speak to him anywhere, and felt the rest of her soul. She wondered why she could sense herself. A rare ability, the priests and other mages claimed. She wondered whether it was something she inherited from Eon. The soul grows. It grows when nourished. Each act of gaining experience is forming a brick that grows the spring of the soul. She picked up the spear. When she mentioned she wanted a new weapon, multiple high-level craftsmen volunteered to make her something customized. Loausan swung it around, as she practiced with her sparring partner, Kay. Her golem opponent used her golem abilities to her benefit. She could create shields of crystal, a temporary growth from her limbs, and block her spear strikes. You don't seem to be in the zone, today. Kay said. Loausan laughed, as her spear thrust slammed into Kay's shield, then followed with a rapid series of jabs. No, I am not. What's on your mind? What's on yours? Loausan countered. Kay didn't like the idea of the League of Heroes all that much, despite being forced to accept the task, and Kay believed a volunteer group, composed of people like Loausan, would work better in the long term. Kay wanted a mix of summoned heroes and native champions because she saw the flaws of the summoned heroes, and believed that native champions could augment the gaps. The summoned heroes were too unstable, despite their power, and strong native champions could serve as their anchors. Loausan, therefore, served two purposes. Kay wanted Loausan to be a counterweight to Eon's increasingly expansionist ways. It was impossible to stop an expansionist Eon, and given the state of the world, some worlds definitely needed an expansionist Eon to make up for their lack of support. Along that path, Kay hoped that Loausan would also support Kay as the anchor of the mixed group of heroes. Of course, Edna, or Rune or Johan would have worked as well, but Kay knew that group was part of the exploratory force that visited all the new worlds. Eventually, there needed to be some kind of specialization. A defense-focused force of domain holders and heroes, and an offense and exploration-focused force of domain holders. The worlds out there was too large, and they needed more pieces on the field. But despite all that, Loausan told herself she was doing this for the right reason. She didn't do it because she was selfish. She was not here to satisfy the hole in her heart. She lied. She knew it was there. A gnawing sensation. She liked this. She enjoyed it. Far more than being at home. Mom, you're really going back to the military? Lauda asked. She had gone through 6 dungeon tours by then, and this was the 15th time he asked. They were not young anymore. Lauda was an adult, and would soon have a family of his own. She would be a grandmother in due time. A grandmother back in the military. Loausan, her own mother, once said it is rare for elven grandmothers to serve in battle, but not so for grandfathers. But she wasn't just any grandmother. She looked at her own mother, and knew the life of a doting grandmother filled with social work and societal duties was not a role for her. In her heart, her calling was still out there. She suppressed it during Lauda and Arlissa's younger years. Tried her best to dedicate her life to her growing children. But the joy and lightness in her heart when she sparred with Kay was all she needed. She knew it when she went back to the dungeons and slaughtered monsters. She could feel it in her limbs. Yes, it's where I should be. Why? Arlissa asked. Because I enjoy it. She was good at it. She still is good at it. She may be a long way from being the best, but she was pretty damned good at it. Lauda understood. Stay safe, mother. But he would ask her again. Her son couldn't help but worry. Because doubt never faded. However remote, there was a chance she would not return. That was life on the battlefield. Arlissa looked at her mother like she was insane. You're already so old. Loausan nodded. It was a response from her human half. For elves, and especially Loausan with the soul-strengthening seed, she felt fitter than ever. I know. But I still want to do this. Level 100 came a few weeks ago after one of the level 90 dungeons, and her class transformed into Eonic Phantom of War. A fairly unique class, despite it being an upgrade from the Eonic Weaponmaster, though Kay said there were about 12 others with the same class in the entirety of the order. Her blessings also mutated at level 100, turning into the only one in the entirety of the Valtrian order, first sentinel of the tree. She didn't like the name. She wondered whether Jura had it first, and a part of her felt a little torn, for taking what should have been someone else's. That door in her mind felt wider, and the way it linked to her familiar felt stronger. Eon's familiars had been able to replicate some of Eon's powers, and it is often capped at their own levels. Someone at level 80 could access a variant of Eon's level 80 ability through the familiar. It was usually weaker. Much weaker. It didn't come from Eon directly, of course. The access of power came through the system. The system replicated Eon as a template, and granted access to variants of that template. It was similar to how the court of the deity retained the skills of its predecessors. She looked at her children. Arlissa disagreed. I must do this. Arlissa frowned. She knew her daughter opposed it. Her son didn't look at her. 2 years later, Loausan sweated it out in the final room of the secret dungeon. She heard of its existence, but it's been a long time since she delved into the level 100 plus dungeons, located deep in the subterranean chambers of Treehome. Kay smiled. That went well. Loausan nodded. The boss of the level 110 dungeon was some kind of gigantic thorny lizard. The materials harvested from the lizard would be given to the order, and they would usually make some weapons or potions out of the remnants. She formed a small team. Kay, Loausan, and 2 other younger Valthorns that were in the early level 100s. They were surprisingly stressed out. Kay and Loausan were famously known as members of Eon's inner circle. Royalty. Elite. Whatever they called it, the 2 of them had Eon's ears, and almost everyone treated them carefully. After the dungeon, they went to that secret town in the underground chambers. The nomadic dungeon town. Every building here was movable, and when the dungeons moved, the buildings moved with it. They had to, because the dungeons expire after a while, the ley line's energy dwindled over time. Their goal was level 125. They could get there with the experience seeds, but there was a flaw to it. Someone who worked hard to get to level 125 was going to be a little bit stronger than someone who got there through consumption of experience seeds. Long ago, Edna and the first generation of domain holders needed to move every other month, because the dungeon's energies would be exhausted. These days, they didn't have to move as much, and the dungeon's energies recharged faster. The domain holders claimed that its Eon's enhanced vitality after Eon hit level 250. Lumuf claimed it was a combination of factors, such as the enhanced energy of Treehome that meant stronger ley lines, and also the higher levels and skill. Kay stretched, and asked. Kay asked the same question many times, and Loausan realized the golem had a tendency to repeat herself. How long is it going to take for you to hit level 125? I don't really know how long it'll take, Loausan said, but Kay said her leveling speed was extraordinary. In many ways, it was. Loausan gained 3 levels when others gained 2. Even next to Kay, with her fragmented hero's blessing, Loausan's levels were still faster. But to Kay, it was absolutely normal. Eon's been watching you since forever, and you've got all of Eon's blessings. If you can't gain levels, I doubt anyone else can. She remembered Lumuf's explanations. Level 125 was where things got harder. They had to earn the right to be a domain holder. The system didn't like power levelers much at that point, and it is well known that most blessings begin to dwindle in effectiveness. Except for the hero shards. Those divine objects worked at all levels, and were so thoroughly broken, Loausan wondered how the system even allowed the hero shards to exist. It upended all the principles that everyone else followed. Mother, how have you been? Loausan asked as she visited Loausan in her home some distance away. Well, better, now that you've decided to take up arms. Loausan smiled at her daughter. The two don't look far apart in terms of age, for humans, they'd be mistaken as sisters. Loausan said nothing. She remembered her mother's emotions when it came to her service fluctuated from acceptance, support, to sometimes disagreement and objection. It often depended on the mood she was in, and the news she heard from her social circle. So, nothing was said. Sometimes, it was better that way. Loausan looked at her. Do you remember when Jura died? Loausan remembered taking Arlissa to visit the place that eventually became the city of Tigashfall. It was a vivid sensation, to speak to Jura through spiritual communion, facilitated by Eon. Something she didn't wish to do, ever. But sadly, death forever remains more frequent than she hoped, and she knew Eon's priests facilitated that service for the spirits that managed to linger for a bit. So she nodded. Loausan smiled. Good. I don't intend to speak to you that way, ever. I hope to see you as one of the domain holders. Loausan let out a long sigh. The path is laid out, but it is not an easy one. I will try, mother. Loausan held her daughter's hand. It's one thing to see our children die in battle. It's another thing entirely to see our children die inside, hollowed out like a husk. If this is what you want, go. The younger elf nodded. Was it that bad? I didn't feel it was. I could smell the fetid stench from my mansion. No, you couldn't. Loausan laughed. Lavaworld was different. It's been a long time since she visited this hellhole, and she was instantly disturbed by how peaceful it seemed. There were demonic trees right around Eon's clone tree. Here, she looked at the gigantic tree, and understood why Kay and the domain holders had concerns. Eon's clones were infinitely adaptable. They would adjust themselves to fit its natural environment, and here, Eon's tree took a hybrid form, a blend of a tree and the demonic energies of Lavaworld. I thought Eon limited its use of demonic energy. Loausan gazed at the titanic tree. Its presence on Lavaworld was a testament, a monolith of nature's defiance. Its tree was both green and red, its trunks glowed, and filled with streaks of red, blue and green. Its leaves were mixed, some bright, vividly green, some in a shade of demonic red, and some others, withered and dead. She could feel it here, the throbbing blend of natural energy, demonic energy, and something else. This is the testing ground. Kay countered. It seems on a larger scale than I expected. I was expecting just a small farm of demonic trees, not an entire forest. Loausan looked, and in her heart, understood the domain holder's concerns. In her mind, maybe it was just their scale of things that didn't line up. To Eon, a forest really was tiny. If its trees covered multiple worlds, relatively, what was an entire forest of demonic trees? It could be just 1%. No, less than that. But seeing it for itself, it did make her feel a sense of disturbance she couldn't quite explain. Lavaworld was a land of magma and lava. If any, what little original vegetation here consumed the minerals and gases of the vents. The demonic trees didn't attack her at all. No. As someone who could feel a connection to Eon, it disturbed her that she felt that same connection with these demonic trees. Eon was the master of these demonic trees. She saw the demonic beetles crawling between the branches of the demonic trees, jumping, stumbling, falling. The demon champion is around here. Loausan asked. No. It's far ahead. Why are we not teleporting? Kay looked around. I thought you needed to see this. What Eon tries to do with the demons. Learning. absorbing, assimilating, studying our opponents to become better. But the humans once said, just as one gaze into the abyss also gazes into them. I fear Eon learns more than he bargained for. You've become really good at propaganda. Loausan countered. She felt shaken. It's standard espionage and insurgency training. The spies talk about instilling fear. They speak of the gravity of the offense. To show proof, to spin small realities into great horrors. To show darkness such that they drown out the light. To rig the scales by playing with the emotions and expectations within ourselves. And you're still doing it. Loausan frowned. You're scaring me about the spy operation's insidious nature. Kay laughed. I've spent too much time with Spymaster Intip. But the best propaganda all starts with a little grain of truth. By showing angles to the truth. By showing how the same fact can be interpreted wildly differently, just by taking a different position. It's like the Void Sea. The Elven Lady and the Golem walked past even more demonic trees, and into an area where Eon bred and experimented on large amounts of demonic beetles. The entire spawning area was filled with purpose-built demonic trees. The truth is whatever you think it is. Kay laughed. You don't believe that sort of flimsy statement. Loausan countered. Kay laughed some more. I don't. I do believe there is some objective truth out there. I believe there is right and wrong, good and evil. I'd like to believe I am still innocent and naive. Loausan nodded. That sounded a bit more like the Kay she knew. They stood there and watched the demonic beetles emerge from their large tree sacks. These were experiments, and they noticed each beetle was slightly different. Very slightly. It was essentially evolution by sheer quantity and brute force. The demonic trees all spawned little beetles. Some collapsed, and their bodies were reabsorbed by the trees. She felt a bond with them. She could feel them through that door in her soul. These were Eons. She knew it. And she wondered, as her eyes gazed at the strange, alien creatures, whether what Eon needs is really a moral guide. K. What? I don't think my role is to be Eon's moral guide. There were others to guide the ship. Oh, she thought about her own history. From the very first days of Freshka, to New Freshka, and then to Freshka. She held faith that their tree was there to protect them. Even when it seemed like TreeTree was overwhelmed by the demonic sludge, the entire valley overflowing with demonic energy, it tried its best to protect them. Then what do you think it is? To be his first believer. Loausan looked at the demons, and felt her connection to the world around her. It was not malice. It was curiosity. A desire to learn. Despite how dark and grim Eon's actions may seem, it is guided by a desire to save us all. Even if all else fails, I want to believe in it. I've seen him in weaker times, and his desire to resist has not failed. Even when he converted demons, even when the demon kings threatened to overwhelm us all, I believe. Kay looked around. Loausan guessed Kay knew people a lot better than she let on. Kay seemed to have a sense of how to press buttons. Progress does not come instantly. Progress does not always take a straight line. Loausan recited it, but her heart trembled at how it felt so relevant to herself. Progress often requires us to gaze into the depths, and discover where we should not go. When a cave explorer dives into the deep dark caves to find what's down there, our role is to keep the faith, and ensure that the ropes for the diver remain secure. We protect the path, for them to climb back out of the darkness. Lesser beings cannot even try to explore the depths of the demon's corruption. The demons would overwhelm them. There truly is no one she knows that could even hope to venture into the darkness and live to tell the tale. If it is not Eon, then who? Someone has to be foolish, insane, and a bit twisted, to venture into the dark, and create the first light. To touch the unspeakable, to understand the taint of their corrupt energies, and master the means to reverse them. Kay smiled. You have more faith in Eon, than you have in yourself. Loausan felt that. That is true. And I'd like to say you were born from pretty much the same cloth. Or patch. Loausan shook her head. Her mind thought of Uncle Jura. She wished for many things, but ultimately, she accepted his decision to die a hero. He died a hero, and left a set of shoes that was always too big for her. It wouldn't be possible to fit into his shoes. But she hoped her shoes would walk the path he once did. To continue the journey that ended for him. It just took her more than a century to realize it. Eon would have said she wasn't ready, back then. She probably wasn't. Now, with lesser worries behind her, she will be. 277. The tree reaches for the heavens. 276.2. Year 269. Satria. The world of Satria thrummed with the power of the divine. To the others, they were faint strings that required some work to notice. For Lumuf, a man of faith, they shone in his eyes, like markings made of wispy lights. They were the signs of the presence of a god's touch. Divinity, at some point, was how the system flagged the presence of an administrator. Hawa's power was a lot more noticeable in a world like this. The way it threaded in the land itself, and how the core of the world was even intertwined with it. This was Hawa's world. Whether it was a core world, that was not immediately clear to Lumuf, but it didn't matter. And now, they would crash a meeting of the high priests. The high priests, or Hawa's circle, as they were called, were having a secret meeting in a mountain far from society. It was one of those secret temples that only the high priests knew about. For those who were not a man of God, it would be difficult to find it, with the illusion magics and even the presence of strong illusions. But for Lumuf, the presence of Hawa's energies made the location as obvious as the sun's, and even easier for him to trace it. All they needed to do was follow it, like the threads left behind by a hero as they ventured in the labyrinths. The circle priests were blessed by Hawa. They said Hawa rarely descended. The priest of Eon knew that exceptions could be made, and the group followed them to the secret mountain temple. Lumuf wondered whether hell meet another god, just like how they met Ava. The place was hardly populated, though the presence of the Hawa Circle's divine guards should be enough to deal with most enemies. They were decked in divine touched equipment from head to toe. What is it with priests and their secret enclaves? Rune complained, as my domain holders stalked the priests. It wasn't the first time they've seen secret enclaves. Even back on Treehome, all the temples had secret bases. We should NT be complaining. Edna countered with a grin. We have enough secret bases to rival them. Rune wanted to respond, but realized Edna was right. Valthorns and Valtrians really had a lot of secret bases all over the realms. It would be the pot calling the kettle black. They watched, and their own senses stretched. The secret enclave of the Hawa was protected by magic, but they were not prepared for trees. Our trees and grasses grew through the magical defenses easily, and through them, we knew what happened within. The circle conducted their secret meetings in an indoor, fairly covered garden with a large airwell. The reason it had an airwell was to allow for Hawa to visit, should the divine being decide to grace them with his presence. That was exceptionally rare, of course, but it is tradition, and so every generation of Hawa's circle continued its meeting in this beautiful garden. The entire garden was the very picture of serenity, and as a place Hawa once visited, the touch of Hawa's divinity could still be felt even in the ground and the rocks of the indoor garden's walls and pillars. The plants here were radiant and magical, as they were touched by the gods. The flowers here are exceptionally beautiful and flowered without withering. The single sunbeam through the air well was somehow at the exact level of strength, neither too harsh, nor too soft, and the small man-made pond shimmered. It was a place perfect for a tea party. But instead, it was the venue of the priest's secret meeting. The Demon King will arrive in about 2 years. How many warriors have you shortlisted for Hawa's consideration? They were a council of equals, but it was often led by the oldest priest in the circle. Each of them started to name a number. Hawa's champions were nominated candidates, chosen from the strongest warriors of the priests. The divine guards were often candidates, as the divine guards themselves, selected by each of the high priests, were all incredible warriors. But Hawa often required warriors of a certain youth and strength, so older, more experienced guards were omitted. They needed to constantly replenish the divine guards with talented young warriors, and each of the relic cities created dedicated academies and institutions for such purposes, or co-opted existing military structures to function as the feeder institution. The relic city of Museo had 2 feeder orders, the Order of Museo's Knights, and the Museo High Guards. The relic city of Olpash relied on the Olpash's Hawa Templars to select its divine guards, and the Olpash's Hawa Templars recruits from the general army. All in, the Hawa's circle named about 40 names, and by tradition, Hawa would select between 5 to 15 to be blessed with the powers of Hawa's champion, and each receive a special set of champion's armaments. The 40, naturally, would have to face Hawa's divine presence. Fainting before Hawa was naturally a rejection. After the shortlisting of names for the Hawa's champions, what followed was mundane administrative matters, such as the coming Hawa celebrations, and other smaller conflicts. This was part and parcel of their yearly priestly affairs, and Lumuf inwardly chuckled at how familiar it all sounded. The patriarchs and matriarchs of the trilogy had very similar meetings, with even similar topics. The Hawa's circle spoke briefly about the demons, and from our understanding, they were not worried. The demons may win certain battles, but when the divine blessed take the field, victory was all but assured. The divine guards, armed with divine blessed weapons, could take on demon champions and the demon knights. The only reason why they were not deployed was because there were not many of them, and most of them were in the relic cities. According to Rune's scouting reports, only 20% of the Divine Blessed Guards were deployed outside of the territory of the relic cities. The rest of them didn't go very far. In other words, the suffering of the other cities can be partially attributed to the relic cities' refusal to deploy more people outside. The relics were infinitely more important than the life of the cities. It was a case quite similar to how the Valthorns are mostly deployed on the central continent and our allied lands. Eventually, after what felt like half a day, the meeting neared its end. The eldest of them said, and then anything else to discuss. There's the matter of the other worlders. The priestess of Pash asked suddenly. Visitors from the other world. Ah, they visited you too, another head priest frowned. What did you tell them? Of course I didn't tell them anything. Who would believe liars like that? But they are real. They really are from other worlds. The priestess of Pash defended. Do you truly believe there are people outside of Hawa's greatness? The other priest countered. The priest of Museo sat quietly. The power they display is real, at least. It must be some kind of stolen relic. The priestess of Pash spoke up. I did not detect such things, and Hawa would have informed us. Then the unexpected happened. The skies twisted, as if a portal opened in the skies above them. The once blue skies turned dark, and then, from the darkness, a golden beam of light that pierced through the swirling black clouds. Here, in a land far from the rest of humanity, the skies parted. The Hawa's circle knew immediately. Their eyes widened in shock, their jaws slackened. The eldest of them immediately prostrated on the floor, and the rest of them followed. The divine guards quickly followed. Hawa came. I felt it through Lumuf. The twisting of divine threads, the distortions of reality. The presence of divinity. Familiar. Like Ava, but different. Just slightly different. The entire world felt it too. The beam of golden light shone from the skies above, and in a sudden increase of intensity, it shot what seemed like a golden burst of light. Lumuf looked up, and with our senses, it was easy for us to pierce it. The light came through a divine portal. Hawa was somewhere else, and I believe we would be seeing a representative. Edna, Rune and Izar looked at each other, and the newer domain holder trembled. Edna looked at Lumuf. This is a familiar sensation. Lumuf nodded. I suppose it knows we are here. We will be fine. Hawa appeared in the middle of the garden courtyard, in the form of a golden shadow. It was as if light itself took the shape of a warrior knight, with a golden tail on its helmet. The golden shadow glowed faintly, and it was possible to see the outline of swords and spears in its figure. A million swords and a million spears. It was as if gazing into a world filled with fights and battle. Greetings, my faithful. The Hawa circle knelt, and did not speak. Their heads were on the ground. Their arms were as well. They waited. You may speak. The eldest of them spoke. His forehead was on the stone floor. Lord Hawa, it is not yet time for you to select your champions. Is there something else we can assist you with? Ah, yes. The demons. They are coming soon. But I am not here for them. The group present didn't dare assume anything. So the eldest asked, what can we assist you with? Say the word and we will do it with all our might. The golden shadow shifted, and walked towards the eldest priest. It is not something for my faithful to do. Instead, we have visitors. Eavesdroppers, it's time you make yourself known. I didn't know how, but the golden shadow looked at us. I instantly felt my domain spam me with notifications. This was Hawa's realm, and that meant Hawa should monitor this world with far greater attention than the rest. In a way, this was expected. We saved time and resources. A part of me was pleased that this went as how I thought it would, even if it did occur a little earlier than expected. Lumuf, Edna and my domain holders were nearby, but not so nearby. So it was a surprise when their own domains were hit with the flood of notification. Lumuf gulped, but nodded. Looks like I must face the god. Edna gulped. Let's go together. At the same time, the priests of Hawa were incredibly surprised, and looked around, wondering who their god referred to. Lord Hawa, do we call the guards? The golden shadow laughed. Guards. You face visitors who would soon be my peers. 1,000 guards would not hurt them. Lumuf landed right in the garden, and the 3 domain holders landed behind him. The priests of Hawa all yelped. You. The golden shadow raised his hand. Hawa's energies were so thick that it was oppressive. Be silent, my faithful. This is a conversation with those a few steps into the divine. Listen well, and learn. Lumuf clasped his hand in respect. Hawa's energies bounced off his body. I felt a strong force push against my own, but it wasn't enough to push me back. Lord Hawa, I am Lumuf, avatar of Eon. I come representing Eon, and we come to seek an audience. For guidance, and assistance. The golden shadow was faceless, and yet it felt like our eyes met. I shall now call upon Eon. Lumuf said, and instantly, the avatar form's energies rippled outwards. The priests, already suppressed by Hawa's powers, now felt my own power flooding the space. A newly ascended one. Hawa's shadow spoke. Greetings, Eon. Greetings, Hawa. I answered in response, my voice spoken through Lumuf. The priests around us trembled. The divine guards froze in their place. We've been traveling the other worlds, in search of the old gods. I see. Have you met my peers? I have only spoken to Ava. Ah, the one of the Great Lakes. How is he? Drifting far away. We all are. Hawa said with what felt like a sigh. I felt your request to meet through my priests, and decided to cut the fats. Let us get to it. What do you wish to tell me? We've found the demon sun, and there is a barrier that stops us from getting close. We ask for your assistance to help us. Hawa looked at one of his priests. His eyes were like a beam of light, and it shone on the priest, marking him. Priest Salazar, present yourself before Eon. He will show you what he has seen. Salazar was the eldest one of the priests, and he trembled. He walked over to Lumuf, and knelt before him. I am at your disposal. Through Lumuf, I touched his head. In an instant, through my Dream Academy, I injected Salazar with our memories of the sun rings, the demon sun, the black blob, and our detected divine energies within the demon sun. Salazar's widened, as if he had gone insane. But he was brought back to the world when Hawa spoke. Now come to me. Salazar walked over as if he was a puppet, and the golden shadow touched his head. A ball of light emerged from his forehead, and was instantly absorbed by Hawa's shadow. Such memories should not be seen by mortals. My apologies, Priest Salazar. It is best if my people do not see the great darkness that festers outside of my worlds. We waited, as the golden shadow seemed to study the memories. This sun ring is unfortunately too far from me. I am centered around my core worlds, my existence weighed around my believers. I can bridge worlds with my clones. I can send your champions there. I countered. Access does not change my weighted core, and my resources are limited. Then can you help us, summon heroes and equip my men with divine equipment? Or fight with us. My champions pale before the foul spawn of the corrupted cores. What they sent to invade our worlds are not what they have to defend their own. The golden shadow said, this foe of ours fought us since the earliest days of the realms, and even now it holds one of my peers as its prisoner. It defeats us by attrition over the Eons, flooding us with its foul spawn, wearing us down over the millennia, until we are unable to bless enough champions to resist. If you come to request for me to fight with you, I cannot do so. I am weakened by distance from my core worlds. I offered an alternative. If you are too distant, surely there will be some others that are closer. If you know where they are, I will seek them out. I do not, and I suspect my peers would be the same. We cannot take the field with you. If we could, we would have done so long ago. But that does not mean I cannot help. I suspected a task was coming. You were offered the pact. Yes. Then you know that each of us has a duty to protect the peripheral worlds. These distant worlds where we summon the raw souls from the imagical worlds, to serve as our champions. The source worlds. Earth. Distance. It is a strange thing. We have a duty to them, and yet, each of these worlds consumes so much of our energy. So much that I have little to spare for other matters. I hear your request, Eon, and I am willing to aid you. I will forge a weapon powerful enough to shatter the Sun Ring's barrier, but to do so, I will need to reduce my energy expenditure. If the gods constantly spent their faith points protecting the faraway worlds, they likely didn't have much left. However, if the faraway worlds could be saved without requiring the use of heroes, the gods would be able to have a faith point surplus, and could do something with it. Help me protect the peripheral worlds. You will have to defeat about 15 of them, and hold it for some time. I will transmit their locations, through Salazar. These are the worlds that drained most of my energies. Freeing them will give me the capacity I need to build something for you. 15 worlds. But, exercise caution. Even if you shattered the sun rings, that same power isn't enough to break through the demon's foul prison. To take the battle to the demon's sun, you will need more than just my power. Seek out the other gods, and convince them to lend you their power. I will lend you mine, when the time comes. Perhaps together, we could remove this foul sun, and free my peer from its grasp. Do you know who is trapped within? I asked. Hawa paused, as if examining my memory. I do not know for sure, but I suspect it is one of the ancient steel worlds, the engineer, Eras. That is Eras' true body, and though it is captured, and its energies used by the demons, it is not yet dead. Not yet dead. So long as his corpse remains, Eras can regain his presence. He still has believers in multiple worlds. Through Salazar, I received bright locations located in the Void Sea. These were worlds under Hawa rule, but were so far away from them. What are the demons? I asked. I do not know. They fought me ever since the day I gained awareness in this world. Perhaps the Ancient One, Gaia, or the first of the sons, Shira, would know. Once you complete your task, you can return here, and I will see you then. You can't help me speak to the other gods. I do not know where they are. We agreed not to pry into each other's affairs eons ago. We agreed to leave each other's core and outer core worlds alone. The war amongst the stars did no one any favors. I didn't know what to say to that. Instead, I looked around at the trembling priests and priestesses. And yet, you have believers even in my world. The golden shadow paused, and as if a realization dawned on him, spoke. Ah, your world is a peripheral world too. I am amused that your world spawns something like yourself. In many ways, this audience is indirectly the fruit of your efforts. Did they send an invasive world your way? He must be referring to the comet. Yes, I see. The golden shadow glanced at the priests and the divine guards. Then back at the papers listing the champion candidates. Actually, let us not bless the champions. I wish to see your powers in battle. My powers are fairly limited. I frowned. I did feel a little set up. And we fight unfairly. A victory is a victory, regardless of the means. The demon spawn will descend in 2 years. Help my priests with the demon spawn, and I will redirect my resources where it can help you. I looked at my forces. Edna shrugged. Rune and Izar looked uncomfortable in the presence of a god. But a demon king is a demon king. Valuable experience to be gained. I wondered whether this is a trap to lure my domain holders here. But somehow, I didn't feel that Hawa needed to trap me. I recalled that they fought us long ago. Why did you order your faithful to wage a crusade against us? Hawa paused. I did. It took a second before the golden shadow realized what I meant. Then I must apologize. Peripheral worlds are always under attack, and I can't spare the energy to scry so far away, and study in great detail. A war. So many deaths. And all I got was an apology. I couldn't help but feel that the gods are callous. But then again, so am I. If I am in that same situation, would I have done things differently, given the limited information? What if it really was an evil force, and I chose to do nothing? Actually, that's what I did all the time. I usually chose to do nothing until I am sure. But some gods think differently. We will meet again, Eon. Till then, my priests will extend their warmest welcome for our distinguished guests from the other worlds. Hawa vanished, and the world could breathe once again. Lumuf looked at his fellow people of faith. They were of a different religion, but people of faith just the same. Looks like we'll have to help you prepare for a demon king. 278. Remnant roots. 278. Year 270. How many damned rocks are we expecting? Prabhu cursed as his biomechanical suit augmented his movement in space. He darted from rock to rock, propelled by his own magic and the vines from the suit, which functioned as extendable limbs, in the way Doc Ock would move about in space. Rocks popped out of the void by the hundreds, as part of clumps or clouds of rock, usually anchored around a single larger chunk of rock. On another side of the vastness of space, Colette fired magical spells repeatedly, blasting the rocks. Despite the seemingly mundane nature of the act, I was nervous. We were nervous. This was about the time the comet should have reached Tree home in one piece, and there was a demon king that we didn't kill. We were waiting for Multipus. It's on one of the rocks, and we expected it to appear. I suspected it's alive. We didn't get notifications, but it's likely we won't get notified if it vanished midway. I wasn't sure when the system gave notifications. Maybe only when we shared the same world, and so if I wasn't there when it vanished, I wouldn't even know. More rocks coming it. The edges of the reality bubble bent, as if the skies and the stars was a flat lake that suddenly bulged upwards. It burst, and a gigantic rock was here. All right, volleys away. Stella and the Void Mages coordinated the defenses. The space-based ballistas and magical cannons were already aimed at the expected entry point of the rocks. More rocks popped up. This batch was even larger than the one before. Demon King Multipus has arrived. Oh fuck. I cursed, and the heroes did too. Right now, Only Prabhu and Colette were in space, dealing with the rocks. Chung was back on Treehome doing whatever shit he was doing. Kefri was in 3 worlds, doing stuff in her little queendom. Adrian was still busy with cleanup of the remnant wolf demons. My domain holders were scattered too. Lumuf, Rune and Edna were still on Satria, Kaffa was back in Delveard, and Johan was still enforcing order in 3world. Even though we knew Multipus was coming, we had too many competing priorities that we couldn't just camp on Treehome and wait. I immediately sent out a ping, and summoned them through my court of the deity, and they were all immediately pulled back from their current worlds. We need to support Prabhu and Colette against Multipus now, I declared, and prepared to deploy another clone, if needed. I still have a few slots available, and having seen what Multipus could do on the Demon's Comet, I was fairly concerned about what Multipus could do here. A swarm of smaller multi-limbed octopus-like demons exited from the larger rocks. They were hiding within the rocks, and their limbs or spines shot out like really long spears and javelins. But this was space, and space was huge. Keep your distance and bombard it from afar. Stella advised through our shared magical network. With the huge distances of space, every attack from the Demon King took longer, and so, for Prabhu and Colette, they were able to maintain their distance and maintain their attacks. Colette said, as she blasted magical projectiles towards the Demon King. Which one's the true body? There were about 15 smaller Demon Kings, and each of them contained fairly similar levels of power. None, I responded, as Lumuf teleported onto the nearest space-based platform. Would it be better to force a battle on one of the rocks? No. Edna arrived soon after. That sounds like fighting on the demon's home ground. Fighting in space is effective against it. But that means we can't get near. Lumuf countered. It was harder to reach the floating, moving bodies of Multipus in space. But we have the advantage. We have enough bombardment weapons to take it out. Rune and Johan arrived next on the space platform. They wore a kind of wooden suit similar to the heroes. How far can you make routes? These days. Very far, Lumuf said. But space is big. We just need platforms to stand. Just support us and we'll shoot it out of the skies. Very well. Prabhu and Colette were both relieved to see the rest of the domain holders arrive. Took you guys a damn while. We were out on other worlds. Lumuf countered. It is only natural that we will take some time. The multiple Multipus bodies attacked, rolling like gigantic space urchins through space. Its tentacles hardened into spears and spines, and attempted to smash into the heroes and my domain holders. But once more, space is big. We found it hard to hit each other, but we outnumbered the Demon King here. You know, we should have called it a sea urchin, instead of an octopus. It's more like a sea urchin. Stella quipped while she helped use her magic to move some of the floating platforms around. Multipus attacked with a combination of piercing strikes, using its spines to try and hit the heroes and my domain holders from afar. In space, we traded projectiles. Lumuf summoned gigantic roots and trees that reached into space. The domain holders would then hop on them, and use them as platforms to get into better firing positions. The platforms, made from rocks such that trees could still be summoned on them, were transformed into living platforms. A few of the void mages maintained open portals, such that my roots could sustain the trees on these platforms, and allow them to give the fighters extra mobility. Wait, Multipus is here, Kefri commented as the news arrived on 3world. Well, send me there. Kefri teleported to my main body, and then, she arrived soon after. The space began to bend some more. More rocks incoming. Another gigantic cloud of rocks appeared out of the edges of reality. Well, shit, Prabhu cursed. We can't destroy rocks and fight Multipus. As the heroes and my domain holders concentrated on the Demon King, most of the rocks drifted past the first line of defenses, and flew towards Treehome. Flying towards Treehome does imply some intentional movement, but these rocks were guided to Treehome. They fell towards Treehome, tugged there by Treehome's magical gravity. Our bombardment weapons were concentrated on the multiple Multipus bodies. More Multipus bodies inbound. Stella watched as more gigantic space urchins popped out of the newly arrived rocks. Keep firing the bombardment weapons. Aim the rocks too. It was a hard decision, whether to aim the rocks or Multipus. Kefri, you should just target the rocks. Rune suggested. No, I want. Not the best use of my skills. There were some additional space-based weapons platforms spread throughout our space, and they began firing weapons at the clouds of rocks. They were very effective on the smaller rocks. Most of them crumbled and turned into space dust within 2 to 3 shots. The bigger ones were hardy. Still, The impact from the projectiles slowed them down, buying time for us to deliver more attacks on the rocks. Meanwhile, Kefri suited up in a full suit of hero's armor, and charged directly at the Multipus body. We were weakening some of these giant space urchins. The spines throughout its body absorbed some of the attacks, preventing some of our spells from reaching the softer inner body. The wall of spines around the body functioned like modern active tank defenses. They launched spines that met with the incoming attacks. So, spells like fireballs and conventional explosive spells were diverted, and triggered slightly outside the body. The spells still injured it, but not as much as a direct hit on the inner soft body. We need to impale this damn thing, Lumuf said, and we can only do so if we charge right into that wall of spines. It was hard enough trying to catch the giant urchins barreling across space. Thankfully, its trajectory was somewhat predictable thanks to the sparseness of space, and it clearly wasn't that good at moving in space. I thought we're supposed to fight damned rock golems. Rune asked Stella. Rune and Johann's magical arrows were extremely effective, and after a while, they took out 2 of the Demon King's bodies. The heroes themselves also changed their attacks to enchanted javelins, coated in magical power. These were more effective at hitting the body through its thick wall of spines. Still, Multipus used the spines on its body as anti-missile missiles, and launched them to meet their javelins. Despite this, we made progress. We were slowly taking out the Demon King, but the rocks drifted past our initial defensive lines, and headed towards Treehome. On Treehome, my Valthorns immediately activated our early warning system, as our defenses swung into action. This is a warning from the Central Authority. There are meteors expected to collide and crash into our world in a few days. Please ensure that your underground bunkers are adequately stocked for 1 to 2 months of hiding. Please ensure that your bunkers are registered with the Central Authority so that our forces will be able to find you. Sky-gazing observatories were able to spot the little streaks of light that were headed to the surface of our world. It was beautiful, and a little scary. We deployed our second layer of defenses, as mages, armed with bombs and teleportation spells, teleported onto the surfaces of the larger rocks and began to plant bombs. We also had cannons and various weapons stationed on our moons and nearby asteroids that started to bombard the nearby meteors. We whittled the meteors bit by bit. The skies were filled with streaks of light, and little bursts in the sky, some occasionally as bright as the sun. Our weapons, firing as frequently, and as fast as they could, bombarded the coming rocks. Our mages worked tirelessly to redirect them away. The locals wondered what it was. Was it the day when the skies were lit aflame? The locals called it the days of Starspark. Some called it the day of the falling stars. For some, safely protected by magical barriers and walls, it was beautiful. Romantic. But it was not all beauty. There were the smaller fragments that were missed, and most of them burned up as they approached Treehome's atmosphere and magosphere. In areas closer to the central continent, our ground-based defenses did its best to intercept the meteors before they crashed. We've started construction of these ground-based anti-meteor defenses the moment we succeeded in cracking the comet. They came in all shapes and forms. Some were large cannon arrays powered by ley lines. Some were beam weapons, similarly powered by ley lines. Some were shields, since some mages didn't like the idea of hitting rocks midair. The variety of defenses performed reasonably well. Throughout Treehome, not all of these meteors were caught. There were slightly bigger ones smashed into the ground, leaving craters. Thankfully, the world was mostly ocean, so the bulk of the missing meteors fell into the seas and oceans. A few caused big waves and tsunamis, but well within our expectations. Meanwhile, the heroes and my domain holders battled it out. Slowly, we destroyed Multipus' multiple bodies. Piercing weapons were more effective, since explosions and blunt weapons were diverted by its gigantic spines. We used teleportation spells extensively, but Multipus itself generated a small sphere of magical disruption that messed with our teleportation. We really could use Chung's arrows at this moment, but he didn't care. He was still too engrossed in his grief and frustrations to entertain us. In fact, I suspected he was fighting the hero class inside his head, because the hero class compelled him to fight the Demon King. This was his duty, and he didn't want to do it. The two forces in his soul battled. For us, we kept at it. Multipus gimmicks were fairly limited in the vastness of space, and it looked like it had things it wanted to do, but couldn't. Both sides fought in an uncomfortable environment, and it was quite amusing that the Demon King struggled with it more than we did. Multipus might be optimized for battle on land. As our attacks continued, the Demon King seemed to have realized it was running out of options. The multiple giant demonic urchins began to escape, and roll towards Treehome. Our weapons and defenses caught up. Stop it, Rune and Johann said. We had harpoon-like projectiles from our earlier days, and we used it to great effect. We attempted to ensnare the multiple bodies of Multipus, to some success. We caught some, and with a heavy bombardment, destroyed a few of them. Some rocks are slipping through. A void mage almost shouted through our shared communications network. The skies were lit in beams of light and magic. The heroes themselves went all out, as the two archmage heroes fired spell after spell at Multipus and the rocks. It's gaining speed, Rune and Johann said as everyone chased after the urchins. Our weapons and spells tried our best to catch the urchins, and we managed to hit a few of the urchins with really strong attacks, and destroyed them. But of the 10 to 20 smaller bodies, we only managed to destroy slightly over half of them. The remaining half were all injured to some extent, but they flew towards Treehome at high speed. Surface team, intercept, intercept. Stella roared as her own set of void weapons launched towards the Demon King. But there are rocks headed our way. The mages manning the various defensive structures countered. We can't target both at the same time. There was no point hitting the Demon King with weak attacks. It didn't hurt the demon, and our energies are better used dealing with other threats such as the meteors. Focus on the rocks, I said. Well, deal with Multipus once it lands. The starry skies were lit aflame, as 6 gigantic streaks of light burned through the outer sphere. Our weapons and magical attacks chased after the remnant bodies of Multipus. Each world has an atmosphere, and to some extent, a magisphere that protected the world. Stronger worlds have stronger protections from such incursions, though the demons have clearly mastered the art of circumventing these protections through their rift gates. Multipus incoming, I declared, as Freshka entered a rare emergency siren. We found Multipus somehow charging towards Freshka directly, which I found amusing. It must have felt my presence and determined that I was the threat they needed to eliminate. Out on the streets, there was panic as the sirens blared. What's happening? The folks asked. Demon King incoming. Expected to land somewhere around Freshka. Please seek shelter or teleport out immediately. Freshka quickly emptied out, as I used my teleportation abilities to send people out of Freshka and towards the rest of the city. My domain holders and mages continued to attack Multipus' body, as it spins through space and pierces through Treehome's atmosphere. Around this point, I created a huge wall of shields around Freshka, as the 6 injured bodies of Multipus crashed in the lands around us. Its impact on the land around them caused huge shockwaves that smashed into my wall of shields. The bodies did not move for a moment, and that was the opportunity we needed. Lumuf teleported down, and immediately charged into one of the Multipus bodies. His body glowed with the fury of the Avatar, as huge magically empowered roots pierced one of the bodies. It died instantly. Edna landed right next to the another Multipus bodies. She took the spines to her flesh unharmed, and slashed right into its actual body. My roots attacked the remaining 4 bodies, and though I injured them, it felt like they still lived. I immediately wrapped my vines and roots around the remaining 4 bodies, and I felt it struggle against my vines. I attempted to drain Multipus of its power. My vines immediately sucked the familiar demonic energies of demon kings. Hate. All I felt was hate. We destroyed 2 of Multipus' bodies, and the remaining 4 were not in good shape. Lumuf quickly teleported to the 3rd body, and once more, with his fury, crushed the 3rd body with an empowered piercing root spear. The 3 remaining bodies melted through my cocoon of roots, and immediately tried to merge. I battered the remaining bodies with my roots, and weakened it some more. The melted bodies reformed, and then reshaped itself into something resembling a golem. Only to die. The heroes and the rest of my domain holders arrived, and they came with the heaviest barrage of magic and weapons. It died before it turned into its golem form. Demon King Multipus has been slain. You've gained 6 levels. You are now level 265. Your abilities and skills have been strengthened. Range decay for abilities and skills reduced. 279. Psychotropics. Chapter 279. Year 270, later half. Multipus was defeated, after what felt like a prolonged campaign. Even if the final battle on Treehome was anticlimactic, I was relieved that it was finally over. There were still some remnant rocks to destroy, and the skies will continue to be filled with momentarily sparks of light from our magical attacks. Some will streak across the skies and burn in the atmosphere of Treehome, creating beautiful meteors. Now, we could redirect our attention to the other issues. Chung. I watched him from afar, and through my vines and trees. His situation eroded. What seemed like insanity began to set in. Madness. Prabhu and Colette seemed upset. They didn't want to be the one to kill him. Prabhu and Colette did visit, and did try to talk to him. But it went nowhere. Madness creeped his mind, as he seemed to hallucinate that everything around him had somehow transformed into demons. Demons. He screamed, blasting trees the moment he saw them. Grass and trees seemed to be demons. Even people seemed to be demons. I summoned the rest of the sane heroes, and updated them on the situation. I didn't know why. I didn't hurt him. I've treated him fairly, as far as I could. Even from this distance, my soul forge could feel an intense disquiet in his heart. The energies of a soul that struggled against the demands of his class. A god's curse. I wondered whether Hawa could remove his class. Try not to kill him. Prabhu said. I would, if you'd help me. I said. This madness is caused by the hero class. I am not mad. Prabhu countered. Adrian and Kefri listened quietly. Not all heroes take the effects and chains of the hero class equally. Madness is the outcome for some. I countered. You don't know that. I've seen enough to conclude madness is likely the outcome of the hero class and his personality. At this point, the only plausible solution, at least, the only non-lethal one, was to do something like what I did to Colette. Remove the hero class from Chung. He would become mortal. Or I'd kill him in the process. Or kill him, if he used his powers to hurt more than it is worth. If you'd help me knock him out, I will try to remove the hero class from his soul. I offered the heroes a way out. I know they don't want to kill their fellow hero. Bloody hell. Prabhu cursed. I don't even know how effective our powers are. The alternative is death. I countered. My domain holders would assist. It was a valuable chance to deal with a hero that's not at full strength. Chung was mad. His magical powers and abilities are still insanely destructive, but with his mental state a wreck, he is likely unable to strategize and fight us properly. Must it be now? If not now, then when? Chung's mental state deteriorates, and he seems to be suffering from some kind of imbalance in his soul. I don't know the effects of long-term internal struggles, and whether it can be fixed, if it's too late. I was being a little manipulative, but it was true. A soul, as I understood it, can get damaged. It happened with the first generation of heroes I encountered, Alexis and Mila. Their souls suffered damage. I've seen soul damage in many ways or forms, and I expect Chung's situation to be similar. There is a rot in Chung's soul, quite similar to Colette's feeling. While Colette understood it, Chung denies it. Partly because he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. Partly because he feels, and still feels I am responsible for Ken's death. In his eyes, I am a murderer. I killed his friend. Prabhu and Colette looked at each other. Somehow, the burden of this decision was with them. They were the same generation, the same batch. If they decided to help, then it was possible. If I have to step in, I cannot guarantee he will live. He is a hero, while we are not. We will have to go all out to take him out. I answered. To be fair, I was excited at the thought of finally taking on a hero. I've known, since the sun rings, that I could take damage really well. Now I wanted to see how I stood against a hero like Chung, with his destructive piercing arrows. Is level 250 enough? I think it is. At least, Patrick puts the chance of me winning to be fairly high, though the level of destruction we will cause was catastrophic. Prabhu and Colette looked at each other. Kefri, Adrian, what do you two think? Kefri shrugged. He needs some sense beaten into him, but as much as I hate to say it, I think he's higher level than me. Adrian nodded as well. Ill help, but yeah. We can't let him destroy and kill like this. I think he might get excommunicated, like. It didn't need to be said. It was kinda sad. I've watched Chung over the years, and he's always been suspicious of me. But I did think we had some level of professional respect for each other's abilities. He knew I could do certain things, and I respected his power. But in a long enough time frame, even friends can be enemies. Then I wondered whether this was how paranoia starts. Day by day, Chung's descent into madness worsened. He blasted more places, destroyed more mountains. He began seeing demons where there were none, and it felt like some kind of suppressed rage. You can't postpone this decision forever. I spoke to both Colette and Prabhu. Colette accepted the decision was necessary. Prabhu struggled a little harder, but ultimately, the hero class did not oppose such matters. There were no restrictions on heroes fighting each other. They fought each other in the past. We had records that heroes went to war with other over petty things. Colette agreed. Let's do it. The plan was the heroes engaged first. They would take the lead, since it is their friend. Lumuf and myself would only emerge in the final minutes, to use our disabling abilities on Chung. Edna and the rest would only step in, if any of the heroes were in trouble. But otherwise, as Colette puts it, Chung is our friend, and well, let us do it. Honestly, I think the chance of my domain holders dying was quite high, especially for my softer members like Rune, Johann, Stella, Izar and Kaffa. We exempted Stella from the battle, since she wasn't really a combatant, and we highly needed her, even if we had other void mages. Think hell kill us? Adrian asked. He might be mad enough to do it. Colette said, and after a long pause. Chung's senses are incredible, and it is for this reason we have not attempted to set up traps nearby. We've seen him attack things for tens of miles away, as if augmented by the hero class. I remembered the very first generation of heroes I met, using super long-range attacks against the Demon King. Chung being able to do as much was entirely a surprise, but meant our ability to trap him was fairly limited. As a hero, he was also blessed with all sorts of protections that most of our restraining powers would likely fail. Except mine. If there was any way we could restrain him, it'll have to be Lumuf and me. Together, I think I could do it. There was no need to alert Chung immediately, because with our teleportation abilities, the rest of the fighting force can arrive immediately. The domain holder's presence would alert him, and that was not something we wanted to do. Not yet. Prabhu, Colette, Kefri and Adrian approached him first. Colette spoke. She spoke softly, but with the hero's senses, it was clear he heard it. Chung. What? Chung stood on the remnants of a mountain, blasted and riddled with holes. Are you all right? All right. Chung laughed. All right. Is that what you came to ask, Colette? Colette nodded. Yes. We wanted to see why you're doing this. Why? Chung answered and then laughed some more. The laughter turned manic, and for us listening from afar, this was unsettling. After that long, manic laughter, he stopped abruptly, and then stared at Colette. Do you really want to know? Colette didn't flinch. Yes. Why are you working with the murderers? We were friends, Colette. We were teammates. We came from the same world. And you chose to side with the murderer. Colette's eyes furrowed. I was there. There was no murder. Ken died, as he always wished to. Murderer. Chung slammed the rock next to him with heroic force. The force of the impact left a huge explosion in the ground. So much for being on the same team, Colette. All of you've decided to work with the evil creature that's clearly using us to achieve its own goals. Colette stared at the archer hero, and asked. So what should we do? Destroy the tree, of course. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. Chung laughed. Were you waiting for me to say that? Colette frowned, as Prabhu held her arm. Chung, doing that solves nothing. It does. It solves the knot in my heart. The fury in my soul. I want to destroy this tree, and everything it created. Chung answered. This theocratic empire is evil, Colette. It is a heartless existence that's only goal is to win. We are just chess pieces in its game. Then why not? Colette asked. Would you join me? Chung laughed. If you do, we can get started right now. Colette sighed. No. Chung frowned, but there was insanity in his eyes. It's your baby, isn't it? He has your baby under control, so you're compromised. He bought you when he gave you that baby. Colette's patience instantly vanished. Chung, not a single word more on my child. There are some things. How do you know your baby is real, and not a puppet created by the evil creature? Chung pressed her buttons. I had the feeling even though he knew that was not true, but the things people say in moments of madness. Of course I know she's real. Colette countered, as magic swirled in her hands. The rest of the heroes took the hint. I hoped it didn't have to come to this. Chung's manic laughter was his response. He stood from the rock, and then, the skies were filled with arrows. Prabhu and Colette retaliated with shields that deftly blocked the magical arrows. We've sparred a lot, Chung countered. But I bet you've never seen this. Chung manifested a magical arrow unlike any other, and fired it across the barren landscape. It resembled an arrow that was tied up with chains, and it was wrapped in anti-magical energies. It easily pierced through the two mages' shields, but it was blocked by a heavy barrier from Kefri, and then exploded. When the dust settled there was a deep mark on Kefri's carapace. But the archer was already shooting more arrows. Colette retaliated with an area magical spell that turned the entire area into a raging inferno. Against the Demon King and its incredibly high armor and health, the heroes generally stuck to high damage, focused spells. These raging infernos were not individually powerful, but they covered wide areas and were likely more effective against Chung. Do you plan to kill me? Chung laughed, as he deftly dodged magical projectiles from the heroes. Kefri and Adrian both charged ahead, trying to get him into melee. They were stronger there, but because Chung was the higher-leveled hero, the two melee heroes stuck together. Kefri immediately countered. No, I hope I don't have to. A magical scorpionoid tail appeared from her back and attempted to stab the archer. But the archer was already gone. Chung frowned. Why do you believe in that murderous tree? Kefri and Adrian landed. Because it is the best choice. Even if it's evil. Even if it kills other heroes. Even if it makes us fight against each other. Chung countered. Look what it has done. It rules over the worlds like an iron-fisted dictator. He somehow dodged a wave of magically enchanted icicles, shot an arrow that created a small shield and blocked some of the spells headed his way. The two melee heroes charged in, trying to make use of the space created by the mages. Yes, it is still the best choice. Because the alternative is demons. Chung countered. Wrong. That's what the tree wants you to believe. The alternative could be us. As heroes, as rulers. Kefri frowned but wasn't affected by the archer's words. She was encased in a golden carapace and attempted to step close. Chung created mirror images of himself, phantom clones that vanished. You told me long ago you didn't like ruling. I don't. Chung replied. But some of us can do a better job. Kefri's claws barely grazed Chung's skin before he somehow vanished. No, we can't. We've seen it in the journals. Chung countered. That's also the tree's doing. How can you believe it? At that moment, thousands of magical spikes emerged around Chung, and trapped him. Chung panicked, and attempted to smash into the magical spikes. It hurt him. Kefri watched, as more spikes emerged. There were spells from both Prabhu and Colette. The two were the only heroes who were closer in levels. Free me. You're under his influence. Colette frowned. Maybe. But what you're doing is not right, either. Prabhu added. Chung, we didn't want to do this. But we can't let you go mad. Lumuf then appeared, and in my avatar form, we entered the trap. Chung struggled in madness, as Lumuf's magical vines quickly grabbed hold of the archer hero. Let go. Lumuf didn't reply, but continued to focus on disabling him. My energies began to flood his body, and we began to forcefully drain his mana. His soul attempted to fight mine, but this was a sensation familiar to me. I remember Alvin struggling in the same manner. Chung was quickly immobilized and paralyzed, as my own energies took hold of the hero's body. He struggled. Let go. But eventually, my spiritual energies overwhelmed him, and he was knocked out. I teleported Chung into the depths of the valley, and we would begin the accursed process of stripping a hero of his class. Chung's soul spring was encased in the same type of shining marble stone. But, on closer inspection, the shape of the rocks had turned into large, thorny structures that surrounded the sparkling, star-filled waters. Get out. I felt Chung's thoughts here. Get out. It was the soul's resistance, trying to force me out. It was like a wave, pushing back at my presence. But this wouldn't kick me out. Not now. My presence was like a tree, and my energies, like roots, grabbed the soul spring, and pierced the soil of his spirit. I would rip the hero class out of his soul, and I would do so in the way a tree would. My roots pierced the gaps of the marble stones, and forced my way in. What are you doing? Chung roared. Stripping you of your powers. I answered plainly, as my spiritual roots drew power from the worlds. No. The rocks cracked, as I pushed. It was harder, because Chung wasn't cooperating. But I am now level 250, and the hero class wasn't going to stop me. Evil. You work for the demons. I don't. You will be the next demon. Chung accused. My roots pierced the foundations of his soul spring, and slowly, I lifted. The rocks felt heavy. They always were. I felt his soul spring try its best to hold on to the rocks. But I pushed. My roots grew, and his soul spring buckled like a road with roots growing underneath it. Maybe. I answered, as I kept working. But I posit life is better than death. So better alive than dead. I rather die with pride and dignity than to serve. I didn't bother answering that. His soul buckled. The entire valley trembled with the turbulent powers of a hero's energies. The four heroes were nearby, near my main tree, and they could feel it. Everything all right? Colette asked Lumuf. Lumuf shrugged. It's going well. The hero class is loose. Kefri had a mischievous grin. Jonpas going to have a good time once he knows you can do this. Lumuf looked at Kefri, and shrugged. He's been having a good time for a while now. We still owe him an apology. Eon promised he'd get an audience with a god. Kefri then looked at Lumuf. Wait, I wasn't briefed on that. Ah, yes. Priorities. Lumuf laughed. We did intend to inform him about Hawa and the things that were discussed, but, things happened. Kefri squinted. Fill me in. Later. Later. Eons getting there. The valley swirled with turbulent magic. Lightning and bursts of magic seemed to manifest out of nowhere, and briefly, everyone felt divine magic. Huh, Lumuf said. That was unexpected. They were instantly hit with notification that their domain had blocked attempted scrying. For the heroes, they were all instantly hit with a headache, except Colette, who felt as if something attempted to touch her. Lumuf looked at the heroes, and immediately encased them in a barrier of roots and vines. Something's trying to look through your souls. Adrian, Kefri and Prabhu struggled for a little, before the sensation vanished. What's that? Lumuf frowned. A god's trying to spy on us. Chung's spirit was in turmoil, as my roots and vines separated the marble rocks that made up the hero class from the soul spring. The hero was in intense pain. The act of ripping out one's class is quite like removing a central pillar of his identity. I spent quite a bit of my energies trying to hold him, as the rest of my energies pushed the hero class out of the way, further and further. My spiritual vines grabbed the stones of his hero class, and bit by bit, I pulled it further and further away from his soul spring. A full day later, the hero class was finally out of the reach of his soul spring, and then. You've removed the archer hero class. You've gained the archer hero class seed. Warning. This class seed is highly unstable and may cause death during attempted merger. Chung was alive, but suddenly, the young man strapped into the soul forge began to age rapidly. Shit. 280. And so begins the War of the Clones. Year 270, Part 3. I cannot de-age him. I said. No. If I said I could, and I did it against his will, I would just prove Chung's point that I could have saved Ken but chose not to. If I didn't do it for Ken, there's certainly no reason to do it for Chung. I had to keep the story straight. But doesn't this mean we just killed him? Prabhu and Colette both looked horrified. Chung's soul just had his class ripped out of him, and even as I tried my best to soften the edges, it is still a traumatic incident and would cause aging. Kefri frowned. How many years does he have left? 5, I guessed, based on the rate of aging. His body was under a lot of stress, and he didn't trade his hero class for the other classes. Wait, does that mean he could keep his immortality if he traded his hero classes for other classes? To some extent. There is a limit, just like how there is a limit with the experience seeds. As far as I could tell, only domain holders are immortal, as the rest of them still age, albeit slowly. In that sense, this was a unique advantage afforded to us non-humanoids. Even a lich, or a mummified corpse, like Jonpu, experienced decay over the years and had to go through a process of rejuvenation. The heroes didn't like this development, of course. Why would they? They thought they just merely stopped him. They didn't think they just gave him a death sentence. Over the days and months, as Chung regained his consciousness, he laughed maniacally. Well done, all of you. Prabhu was the only one there when Chung laughed. Chung, you were being destructive. I know. Chung laughed. And you did it. Well done, Prabhu, well done. You've worked with evil, and decided to kill me. I didn't know it was going to go this way. And you trust that crazy tree anyway, don't you? You knew, and yet you trusted him. I was tempted to just kill him anyway, but I didn't care. Chung now posed no harm, and I thought it was useful to have him around, as a test for the hero's nature. Prabhu shook his head. We didn't expect it either. You think the damn tree didn't know this was going to happen? It never removed a hero class ever. Prabhu countered. And you were a danger to everyone. It was the only way. Was it? You were not listening to us. Why should I? Prabhu frowned. You're being difficult. Chung frowned as well. Is that what you call standing up for myself and what's right? No. You're being destructive, and you wrecked the place in the southern continent. I don't call that standing up for yourself. I did that, didn't it? Chung said, as if feigning forgetfulness. Why not just kill me? That's what the tree would want. It's not what we want. Prabhu countered. For the greater good, this is the best way forward. For the greater good. The former, now powerless hero said. That's how we justify it all. Yes, it is. Prabhu somehow snapped. And it is the greater good if you're not destroying shit. Fuck you. Prabhu stared at the shell of a man. I thought I would be sad to see you die. As it turns out, it's just me holding on to someone who I thought was my friend. Someone who was with us for the fight against the demons. Not for. No. You were always looking for excuses. I had it. We've been in this world way longer than Earth, or wherever they call it. These worlds are our homes, now, and I'd be damned if I don't protect it. All because you have a daughter. Fuck you, Chung, Prabhu said. So what? It's because I have a daughter. I want to protect the world she lives in. At least I have something worth fighting for, unlike you just wrecking shit up because you think you're better. I did. Ken was always our friend. Prabhu countered. Even when he vanished and hid away, ditching his responsibilities as a hero. You, on the other hand, used him as a fucking crutch. You blame all your mistakes on Ken's death, and it fucking tires me. I liked you better when all you did was eat snacks. Chung somehow aged in that moment, while he looked at the hero that usually seemed quiet. Prabhu was not a person of many emotions. But he snapped today, and Chung wasn't sure why. Maybe the gods tried to ensure the heroes stuck together, so with each other, they were forgiving of each other's faults. Now that Chung didn't have the hero class, those effects vanished. I wasn't sure. Guess I ate something too spicy and I just had to vent it. Enjoy your final days, Chung. I hoped we could be friends like we used to, but I realize all I am talking to is a shadow of the person I once knew. A rotten shadow. Go to hell, Prabhu. Go fight for the evil tree, and I hope you realize the mistakes you made. In your final days, Prabhu walked to the door of the fortified biolab. I've seen the spirits of the heroes that died before us, and I know we are on the right path. It's a shame you refuse to see the cruel reality. We will go to the demon's hell, and we will destroy them. Fuck you. Oh, did I tell you Eons spoke to a god? Prabhu smirked. Chung stared, his eyes a mix of confusion and betrayal. What? The order finally found a god-protected world. Wait, don't go. Prabhu shook his head. I'll come back if I feel like it. Bye. Chung yelled, while his body was strapped to all the vines and roots that tracked his every bodily readings. Lumuf, Rune and Edna were back on Satria, where the Demon King would arrive, this time, escorted with an actual Valthorn contingent of our own, mainly to set up the plan. Our Void Mages quickly triangulated the location, and since we were expecting a Demon King similar to Sabnok, our approach was the same. Nuke the shit out of it once it spawns. Once the plan was ready, we had to brief the locals. The meeting location was the city of Pash, the home of the priestess. The full Hawa's circle was present for Lumuf's presentation of our plan. The usual way. Bombs and explosions, then followed by direct engagement should the Demon King survive. Our plan also involved the deployment of one of my node trees in order to transport the heroes from our world to Satria, and all the bombs we needed for this purpose. The priests didn't see the necessity for such crude methods. In fact, they were horrified. On worlds such as Satria, the demons were not the endlessly consuming plague. Here, they had to obey the intensely powerful rules woven into the fabric of this world's reality. So, in the core worlds of the gods, the demons were not an existential threat. They couldn't be, because the gods who watched over them would intervene. It didn't cost them much to intervene. But since Hawa himself declared that we would deal with it, who was the Hawa's circle to oppose our plan? None of them wanted to speak up against Lumuf, because he was my avatar. Our presence distorted reality, and warped the environment around us. Just like when I ascended to be a domain holder, my presence rippled throughout the world of Treehome, that even lilies could sense it. Lumuf's presence on Satria had a similar effect. Our threads mixed into the divine presence of this world, and it made the priests uncomfortable. They have never felt their lord's authority challenged this way. The presence of another god in a world that never had the presence of another was unnerving, and it shattered a long-held belief. The primacy of their god's place in the multiverse. Their god was only one of the many. Eventually, the Hawa's circle themselves appointed to attend to our needs. They would act as facilitators, and ease our conduct with the rest of Satria. The head priestess of Pash, and the head priest of Museo. Rune had an eye roll, like the fates were playing some kind of divine prank on him. Maybe she volunteered herself for the role. It is time we are formally introduced, then. My given name is Olivia of Pash. The head priestess said. And I am Michael of Museo. We would later find out that they are named that way because once they ascended as Hawa's circle, they are supposed to consider the entire city that is their home state as their home, and as such they are given the city's name as their normal family names. The land where the Demon King would arrive was located deep in the uninhabited territories, and it seemed that the magics of Hawa had somehow twisted their magical rifts such that they could only land in a few specified locations throughout Satria. These areas became known as the Demon Lands to the Satrian populace, uninhabited, and perfect for a node tree. Or a clone. Our forces easily pierced the depths of the demon lands. Demon champions were frankly nothing at this point. Edna and Lumuf could handle multiple simultaneously. I thought about what was the right level of force to apply, and briefly weighed the risk. From what I could see so far, Hawa offered to help, but we would have to help free up resources. With a node tree, I didn't show my true strength. But why? Why hold back? Should I be fearful of Hawa's retaliation by placing one of my clone body on its outer core worlds, or betrayal? I briefly considered the experiences so far. I would have the clone I lost in year 261 back in my reserves soon, and Alka would be back in business in about 2 to 3 years. Lumuf understood my concerns, and then asked Olivia and Michael, "How trustworthy is your god?" I saw the silliness of the question. How could their own priests know their god's character? But even so, what their answers helped. If Hawa is not worthy of trust, no one is. Michael of Museo answered in confidence. Hawa's decisions in its peripheral worlds do not inspire that sort of confidence. Yet, I suppose to those who live in privilege, what would they know? Olivia's response was similar. There is no one we trust more than Hawa. Lumuf nodded. Is Hawa's promises reliable? Olivia and Michael's facial expression was one of genuine disbelief. Of course. They countered, as if appalled that their god's character should ever be questioned. But the dealings between gods are all a matter of trust, is it not? The system could ensure contracts and agreements are followed, but it would take a pact with the same level of power like the world faith system. In short, it would be a constitution, formed from the combined votes of the multiverse. But right now, my dealings with Hawa will entirely be based on trust. The belief system, in its design, should be one of trust. One where the gods act in accordance to their myth, and Hawa was never seen as a deceitful god. After all, actions contrary to the god's character will cause the gods to lose believers. It is an incentive to encourage consistent behavior. Very well. Lumuf made the two priests of Hawa speak of their god's character, to describe his greatness. They preached. They were trained to do so from a young age. Hawa in their eyes was the god of laws, honorable battle and honor. Of battlefield excellence and the purity of skill. To the Satrians, Hawa was the only god in their eyes. Naturally their own creation myths explained how the primordial egg created Hawa, and the remnants of the primordial egg formed the rejected parts of the world. The demons. It was totally untrue. Hawa's faith on Satria didn't speak of the others at all, unlike how Hawa's faith on Treehome was a blended creation myth. Perhaps, the gods created a few versions of their own creation myths. A set for the peripheral worlds, that includes the other gods, and a set for their core worlds where they would not encounter the other gods. In that sense, the existence of the other gods meant Hawa lied to the common populace. I could see the reason for it. After all, Hawa wanted believers, and for its core worlds, it was best not to give its believers options. Here, he was supreme, and the only alternative wasn't one. Only the inner circle, the Hawa's circle, knew of the other worlds. But even they didn't know the full picture. There was no reason to know. Despite this obvious lie, I didn't think it invalidated Hawa's trustworthiness. The variation in creation myths didn't seem malicious. I also had value that I brought to the table. I could offer the Hawa a way to gain more faith points, by transporting his priests and believers to places that would cost too much faith points for him to reach. I could defend worlds where it cost too much for him to act. So, I decided it was worth it to give this relationship between two powers a shot. If they wanted to see us in action, well, I'd do so with a clone. 281. Logged and loaded. Year 271. Satria. My clone was placed close to the Demon King's predicted arrival slot. The actual location of arrival would be rigged with enough ordinances to nuke the place to ashes, so my clone was located a little further away. The rift swirled. Still aside from the safety of my clone. I can't help but feel that we've just signed up to fight someone else's war. It is true. But some concessions have to be made, for trust. In an agreement between powers, what else could there be but trust? We still have the void layers to explore. Stella frowned. I felt her eagerness to see the void layers for herself. There was something that we wanted to see, there, and yet here we are, torn by all these other obligations. We were stretched. And we will be stretched even more. The scale of the Valtrian order needed to match our ambitions. I needed to expand on a larger scale, and to some extent, these peripheral worlds seemed like the perfect place for it. They were exposed to enough demonic attacks that their people should have a reason to take up arms against the demons. I know. I consoled the Void Mage, but she was here anyway. She monitored the subtle shifts in the void paths of the Demon King, making sure we got the right spot. She merely grunted at my response, and after a while, asked, "You plan to send someone over to the other side?" The rift gates hummed in the distance. The Valthorns present placed our bombs, as the two officials of Hawa, Olivia of Pash and Michael of Museo, watched as bombs were carried out of my clone tree by the beetle trucks. They watched with what seemed to be a mix of horror and amazement. We've gotten better at the logistics of remote mining Demon King spawn points, and my plan involved designing standard deployment packages, each with enough to deal sufficient damage 2x over, and deliver them to each of our attacked territories. We needed to transform each fight with the Demon King into a routine process that we could repeat everywhere. We would be a well-oiled war machine. If only to get the coordinates. I answered. Stella nodded. A world that creates a Demon King like Sabnok would be of much interest. What sort of natural terrain they possess, are features that caused the creation of such Demon Kings. You sound personally invested. Do you want to go? I wondered. It is. I volunteer to go. Take Edna and Rune with you. Got it, Stella said. It'll give you a better reading on where. The Valthorns were in full swing as they set up the bombs. Lumoof watched, and the team was familiar with our usual layout that they worked with hardly any intervention from the senior team. There were set formations that determined how the bombs were arranged throughout the arrival area. Impressive work, Michael said to Lumoof. Lumoof merely chuckled. It's not enough, though. Lumoof said. We'd probably have to step in for the finishing touches. Is it? I would have thought this amount of magical weapons would be sufficient to cause an explosion. Michael countered. The priest grinned at the priest of the other faith. You underestimate how hardy the planet is. Really? Yes. Lumoof nodded. We have miners that use explosives for their underground mines. Michael clarified. I had the impression such explosive weapons would be enough. The Demon King isn't a creature that dies easily. Michael paused. I noticed it's mostly ordinary explosives, but since the opponent is the Demon King, why not use holy explosives? Lumoof stared at Michael, and realized that Hawa may have access to divine tier bombs, created with Hawa's magical energies. The Demon King isn't vulnerable to holy weapons. Most anti-demonic spells and abilities do not apply to the Demon King. Really? Michael paused. Our divine champions would always claim it is the Hawa armaments that made them so powerful and use it to defeat the Demon King. Lumoof nodded. Weapons made by your god must be truly powerful. I'd like to see them, if we have the chance. Michael nodded. Sure. Olivia, meanwhile, looked around. Lord Lumoof, have you seen my husband around? Lumoof paused, a little annoyed that she referred to Rune so casually. No. Demon-conquered world. Orion. The rift gate wobbled. Stella's bubble of void magic touched the rift gates, and easily resonated with the frequency. And so, the trio was now on the other side. They immediately realized this was an unusual world among unusual worlds. There's some kind of magical hexagonal grid in the sky and the lands. Stella looked around in both amazement and horror, as she felt the same forces of divine law trying to apply on them. Luckily, it bounced off their domains. Rune breathed a sigh of relief. I don't remember ever being so relieved. Stella nodded. What sort of god created this world? A world that has fallen to the demons. The world that created Sabnok came from a world twisted by divine energies. Let's move, Rune said, as he looked around the environment. It was incredibly eerie to observe the demonic warriors stop after moving across a certain number of hex grids and stop. The magical grid, imposed by divine law, caused creatures that caused those grid barriers to feel exhausted. The void domain holder watched and immediately made the connection. This entire world was designed as if it was a board game played on a hexagonal grid, and the rules were imposed on regular creatures by way of divine law. I can see why it fell. Edna said. Those board games have to follow rules, but the demons and their imported army will feel limitless, even if the demons have to obey the rules. The grids tried to impose their will on them repeatedly, but as domain holders they were spared. The terrain itself was also shaped by this magical grid. Temperature, terrain, features, vegetation all changed just by crossing the grid. Edna joked. You know, of all the worlds to be summoned to, at least you were not summoned to this world. Heroes should have some really lopsided powers, no. Rune countered. Something to offset the disadvantages of this system. It may not matter if the way you fight has to follow the stupid rules of combat like Satria. Edna said. Stella nodded. In a world like this, where the divine law imposed grid-dictated movement, stamina and attack time limits, 1,000,000 demonic hounds could deliver death by 1,000,000 tiny scratches. But the divine law was woven into the creation of this world, and so, its core, accordingly. Rune led the ground, moving through the grids as if they didn't exist. The terrain was beautiful in a strange way. With the aid of magic, they flew across the hexagonal terrain and soon found a large hexagonal hole in the ground that led to the core. Well, that's the core. The divine law in this world also served other functions. As they approached, it spawned a screen that all could see. It was likely to be a feature unique to this world, perhaps as an experimental world by one of the earliest gods. The tunnel to demon corrupted core of Orion. Long ago, Orion fell to the demons, and ever since then, it has birthed demon kings to fuel the demons' ceaseless invasion to the other worlds. Countdown to Demon King completion. 14 days. You know, life would be much nicer if we had tool tips like that all the time. Rune countered. Stella looked at the sun, which initially seemed normal. But, as it turned out, the divine law also created an interface on the sun and the sky itself, and had a clock overlaid on the sun itself. We don't need clocks in this world, Stella said in amazement. That's both incredibly useful and annoying. Rune frowned. I am going to be scolded for waking up late if this was a thing. Ha, Stella smirked. Who dares scold the archer god? You. Rune laughed. Anyway, let's find the rift gates. We need to rob a few, right? Stella nodded. They found 4 rift gates, and sent them back to Treehome, and then decided it was time to head back for the battle. Back on Satria, the way the demonic world's path glowed was the same, as my men prepared. The bombs were ready. The 2 priests of Museo and Pash were unnerved, they were so near to the Demon King. We have never been asked to be so close. The priest of Museo said, but in the safety of my newly placed clone, there really was nothing to be afraid of. My clone's presence on Satria had been unusual. I felt like I was exerting power over a land that resisted me, and my influence on the land bounced off like water on an oily plate. I suspected this was how Hawa controlled the world of Satria. Edna was nearest to the battlefield. She would be the first to stand against the Demon King from the hexagonal origin world. Her magical quest swords floated around her like her guardians. Stella smiled. After this, can we explore the void worlds? Yes. Both will have to happen at the same time. The path twisted with the foul energies of a Demon King leaving their original world, and then, the Demon King Ucller arrived. It was a 6-headed hydra, each with a different face, but its power level was comparable to the variant we faced on Mountain World. Bombs. The bombs detonated, and reality itself warped around the intense magical explosion. Edna, Lumuf, and my domain holders charged in. I'd call on the heroes if we need to. But for now, with our focus on growing our own strength, I decided to prioritize this battle for my domain holders. The bombs left the Demon King Ucller with 4 of its heads burnt, and it was beginning to regenerate. It was a common gimmick amongst Demon Kings to have regenerating parts. Lumuf entered avatar mode and my root spears pierced its gigantic armored body, and more lesser demons appeared. I suddenly realized. This was easy. My spiritual energies messed with the regeneration. Unlike heroes who had to keep figuring out how to destroy the Demon King's heads repeatedly. I could tamper with regeneration by messing on the mechanism at a spiritual level. The ability to block spiritual access also prevented healing. A body heals based on a biological code, provided by the spirit. Magic has a reference point. I've done this before. Easy. Edna's magical blades chopped off one of the heads. Rune and Johan's arrows blew off the other. Then the Demon King attempted to transform. But it was interrupted. My roots, through Lumuf, pierced its body. We've faced Multipus, and Multipus was way tougher. My roots crawled and snuck through its inner parts, and wrapped around its demonic core. And then Lumuf ripped it out of the body. Its fluids shot out of its body, magical energy and demonic mana leaked, as the muscular roots ripped the heart of the Demon King Ucller out of the body. I felt it attempted to reshape, transform. It won't. I do not allow it to. My energies penetrated the demonic king's core and the Demon King found its shapeshifting abilities disabled. My roots drained it of mana. Its large, massive mana pool attempted to coalesce, as if to trigger a detonation of some kind. As it always did. But no. This time it failed. I drained its mana quickly, as Lumuf winced in pain. It felt like minutes. It probably was. But the Demon King's core struggled like a machine going through its last moments. It was like a spinning machine, it whined and whirled in its last moments. But, fueled by the fury of the avatar, Lumuf could take it. The Demon King's body, now separated from its body, froze as if petrified. Without the heart of the Demon King, it was no more than a puppet with its strings cut. As more demonic mana was drained out of the Demon King's core, the body itself began to collapse. It soon melted into goo. Lumuf stood close at the center of the goo. Two gigantic muscular masses of roots and vines emerging from his body held the demonic king's core. Drained of its mana, it was like a machine that ran out of juice and shut down. Well, take this, Lumuf declared, as the demon king's core vanished, sent back to Treehome for further investigation. This was getting easier. The locals got a notification. We didn't. The will of Satria's refusal to acknowledge my presence in this world meant none of us did. But the two priests of Museo and Pash received the notification, and they were stunned beyond words. Edna landed next to Lumuf. Good job, Lumuf. You've gained a level. You are now level 266. Only one level, I said. But it didn't matter. Both Lumuf and Edna benefited from this battle, because both of them experienced a large surge in power. Power we will need for the next phase of our interplanar war. The two domain holders were now level 200. Well, what did you get? Edna looked at Lumuf, and asked him first. I thought you should say it. I thought your choice would be more interesting. Edna smiled. I suppose so. But I am more curious about your choice, Lumuf. As weird as it sounds, I only have two choices, instead of three like Eon. My avatar grinned. Lumuf then explained his choices. Lumuf's first option was the High Altar of Faith. The High Altar of Faith granted the avatar of Eon the ability to select non-domain faithful believers, and admit them into the altar. Up to 20 people will be allowed to join the High Altar. Eon may activate avatar mode through the members of the High Altar, though the expressed power is limited to 3 times their level. Only 2 full avatar mode can be active among the High Altar members at any one point, though all High Altar members can activate a lesser version of the avatar form. Members of the High Altar stop aging while they are members, and will share sights, senses, and knowledge with the avatar and also Eon. High Altar members can be resurrected by Eon at a negligible cost. In addition, High Altar members can teleport items to each other, and can summon each other to their location. However, they cannot bring others with them. Eon and Lumuf will also gain control of each of the High Altar members. Selecting this option will also enhance Eon's lesser wooden avatars, and increase the Pantheon's lesser wooden avatar power limits to level 150. That's like a weird mix of Court of the Deity and avatar mode. Edna immediately thought. Not that useful, though. What's the other one? Lumuf's second choice is the Towering Avatar. The Towering Avatar elevates the avatar into the total reincarnation of their origin gods. Lumuf will now be able to function and support all of Eon's abilities, including Soulforge, the clone's teleportation, and so on. In addition, under this form, the Towering Avatar is able to summon Eon's spirit. Eon's spirit functions as a temporary but complete incarnation of the patron god. Destruction of Eon's spirit does not result in any penalties or drawbacks. Eon's spirit is usable once a month. Selecting this option will slightly upgrade Eon's combat abilities, and also doubles Eon's mana pool. Wait, is that it? Edna said. Yeah, it just means we no longer need to deploy Eon's clone for battle, and the clone can now be reserved for permanent establishments. Oh, ooh, and it's like we have 2 Eons in battle. Myself and the clone. And the mana pool will double. The earlier option allows us to have mini Eons all over the place. But we already have clones and nodes. Correction, mini avatars all over the worlds that can be revived. In short, zero-risk explorers. Stella added. Zero-risk explorers suddenly make that option a lot more appealing, for the void worlds. Edna realized. Lumuf nodded. I think the choice is whether to go wide or to go tall. Both have their own legitimate use case, especially as Stella said, explorers. Teleportable explorers and envoys. Or a portable summon of Eon that we can use in place of clones, so that we can reserve clones as home bases. This could be tremendously useful if we're faced with a lot of fighting on the peripheral worlds. We wouldn't need to lock up clone slots to secure the frontier. The question sat in the room for a while. What's more useful? I say tall. A portable Eon without locking up clones is way more useful than mini Eons everywhere. What if we encounter dangerous threats? The likelihood of threats. I am talking about hostile gods. Stella said. The High Altar can function as high power, but zero-risk explorers, while having a decent fraction of Eon's power. Lumuf then looked at Edna. What about yours? Edna laughed.